ask about our willingness to agree to an extension of the time. You all are required to review this, and the planning board, I understand, is 45 days to make their recommendation. Happy to agree to an extension, but we are on a schedule, so we would like to get an idea of what the next step in your mind is. I imagine, especially for the decommissioning plan, you guys will want to have some sort of working session. So quite a few items covered under that section alone. And some of the other technical items discussed, measurement of sound, et cetera, are rather in-depth. You may not be able to answer all the questions tonight, so. Really what we're looking for tonight from the planning board is the path forward and what you all see as the next steps.
Well, one of the things that I think it's important for us to consider is the proposed zoning changes that others have proposed, which are in this healthy packet of information.
Sure.
And I read through one of them today. I didn't read through the others. I think they're all pretty similar, but I don't know how others feel. I don't think it'd be fair to make a recommendation until those are considered.
Okay, well,
I don't know how others feel.
please.
Is at least reviewed.
Could I just ask whether a petition's been filed formally, just so that we can get a copy of that if that's been filed by others?
What's that?
Whether a petition had been filed by others that we could see a copy of, or whether it was comments.
We were told that in order to, that we needed to, couldn't just come and say we had to have a proposal and send it in, and that's what I think the citizens did. And as far as, they're not all in yet. I said at the last town meeting, I know that our committee on Clear Skies is putting together with, trying to make it more with experts and getting more information that's, you can look at it legitimately and see. So ours isn't even in yet.
Laura also reminded me to make the point that every single one of these issues is going to be thoroughly reviewed, fully litigated in the Article 10 process, right? And so our goal is to align the town's vision with ours ahead of that process, rather than depending on the state or depending on that process to build the information you're looking for. Our plan as developers is to file our Article 10 application at the beginning of the year, so call it February, March, and so it gives you a sense of our timeline. I would ask the town, including the town board, to discuss what a review timeline looks like for you all, but if you're going to have multiple meetings for review and discussion and plot it out against that. In terms of the proposals that I've seen on Heritage's docket, I can't really comment on a proposal that's not before the board, but what we're proposing is to align the existing wind ordinance with what's been litigated already and approved at Casadega, because it has already been thoroughly litigated, right? Counter proposals that seek to kill the project or prevent it from moving forward should just be understood for what they are, right? The town of Clarendon has a wind ordinance that's 14 points long. 13 points are reasons why they're concerned with wind, and the 14th says go to Barry. So if you're considering a counter proposal, that's something that I've said.
I think that, that puts it in I think the counter proposals out there are being put in by concerned citizens for the health and well-being of Barry, not to, I think they're looking after their neighbors and not to kill the project.
Well, be that as it may, the effect would be to kill the project. I have some material I brought, which I, would like to show you, if I may.
Ben, this is a planning board meeting, not a meeting with you and George,
Understood.
okay? You should be talking to us. George, if you have a question, you talk to us to get that answer.
I agree. Yep.
Just point of order.
Yes, sir.
May I interject something?
No.
Tom?
Be that as it may, I do have some boards here which I think may help you to contextualize my proposal. So there are just a couple here. And we'll have these at our open house, but I think it's important to understand what setbacks look like. So on the bottom board here, we just show how setbacks essentially work, right? There's setbacks to different things, and they're overlaid on top of each other. Their end result is buildable area for turbines, right? It's simple enough to understand. Here's a parcel in the town of Barry, and it shows how that works, essentially, given the setbacks that we proposed, right? And so maybe I should just quickly talk through what those are.
Yeah.
And what the result of the proposal would be, right? So critically, the town's current wind ordinance sets a setback to partial boundary of tip height and a half, right? So depending on the turbine that we use, if we use a 600-foot tall turbine, that tip height and a half would be 900 feet, right? And it proposes that setback to the partial boundary on which that turbine is sited. And so we have proposed that this standard be amended to contemplate setback waiver by adjacent parcels, right? So otherwise, a turbine 600 feet would have to be 900 feet away from every partial boundary, of which there are few parcels in the town of Barry on that dimension. So with 900 feet to participating parcel boundary, maybe the next parcel over, or perhaps that point, we would still respect a setback to the parcel boundary itself. We don't build turbines on a parcel boundary. It creates incongruities, right, in the ownership. We have not proposed to amend the town's setback to homes, which is 1,000 feet. As a practice, we would never set a turbine closer than 1,500 feet to a home, so we comply. There's no change required. And then similarly, setback to roads is 1,000 feet, which is more than appropriate if we're 1,500 feet away from homes, so necessarily 1,000 feet from roads. So I'll leave this up here. I encourage you all to look at it, and I'll stand here after the meeting and answer questions if you like.
I think, to summarize what you're saying, from what I understand your proposal, instead of the existing setbacks as 1,500 feet from any boundary line, your proposal, as I understand it, is 1,500 feet from a non-participating.
900 feet.
It's 1.5 times.
1.5
Yeah.
from a non-participating.
Right. So but it is a little complicated, right? There are different setbacks to different features, and so it's important to understand what each one is. And then
Should I?
pause and drive that point home.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think Lance's point is well taken, that we're not proposing to remove setbacks.
Right.
We're proposing to specify that if an individual owns both this parcel and they sign a contract with Apex, that setback would not be measured from this line. It would simply be, if this is owned by a non-participant, that setback would be 1.5 times. But otherwise, the company would need to adhere to the other residence setbacks and house setbacks.
Can I ask the attorney for Apex a couple questions?
At the pleasure
Is
of the
that
board.
acceptable?
Yeah.
Okay. One question is, have any geological studies been done in East Barry to study
But we're talking about setbacks.
okay.
So this topic is setbacks. So if you have a question relative to setbacks, you're welcome to answer.
Yeah, and I've been looking for a declaration from the town board for some time now, in that, and I know part of Barry's wind law discusses them, if there's a problem, that they can go to the zoning board of appeals and get a waiver, such as running, I'm concerned that homeowners adjacent to these projects may lose their property rights in that they're gonna use eminent domain to run lines across their property. Is there any chance that that could happen, on the slim side?
Well, I mean, that doesn't directly pertain to this, but I will tell you that Apex does not have eminent domain authority. You have to be a specific type of transportation corporation in order to exercise eminent domain, or you need to be a government. Apex is neither of those things, so they don't have the ability to exercise eminent domain.
They would never run any lines across any adjacent landowner's property without their permission? Or
Not without a lease. They wouldn't be able to.
Or to appeal to the zoning board, so they'd never be able to do that.
That's right. The town zoning ordinance contemplates creation of a wind overlay district, thinking that we'll file a seeker petition, right? And the town will be the lead agency, and then they would create, they'd approve the project in the context of what it calls as a wind overlay district. Article 10 supersedes that procedural requirement, but still, requires us to address the substantive standards of each setback. So that's a little bit confusing. And looking at Barry's wind ordinance, I can understand why that would be confusing.
So then, in order to ease in order to ease the minds of adjacent landowners, then it would be possible, in your estimation, to get a declaration from the town board ensuring them that their land rights would not be violated in any way?
Their land rights would be established based on the zoning. Right, Lance?
As I understand, even our current law says that the only time that the non-participating landowner could contract with Apex to, in other words, so if they said, well, I agree that the setback from my property line should only be, a shorter distance than 1.5 times the tip height, they can do that. If they want to say, I'm going to give Apex an easement through my property to run a power line of some type or put up a substation, they can do that.
That's right. So we're, the section of law 104 that discusses setback waivers that requires us to get written agreement from adjacent landowners, right? If we're going to have a waiver of setbacks, so that's how that works. The other item I just want to point to before
I got one question on the
Yeah,
setback. Have currently in the town is restricted to one parcel, is that correct?
Essentially, yes. If I understand your question correctly.
In other words, it's the setback, the current zoning establishes the setback from one parcel.
Yeah, it says in the lower.
And you're trying to you'd like to change that to have it be adjacent parcels that have a signed land lease,
Yes.
right? So was your goal in attempting to change that, was your objective established from the height of the tower or from the actual adjacent land distance?
Even a 500-foot tall tower, you would only be able to site maybe 3 or 4 anywhere in the town of Barry, given the way that
Well, I guess my question is relative to the current zoning we have, which
Yeah.
is 250 feet?
no, it's 500 feet.
500? Okay. So even with the 500-foot zoning we currently have, then, that wasn't,
No problem.
okay, gotcha.
George.
If it's okay, if you make this recommendation, and the way I understand it, the owners own both pieces of property, and so they're kind of saying, yeah, it's fine to do that. Are you locking them in that they will never be able to sell that property? Because it won't be in compliance if they ever sold it.
What do you mean it's not in compliance?
If someone bought that property to put a house up or whatever, it's too close. It wouldn't be,
Yeah, the lease is on the property, that's right. You sold the property, the lease would transfer.
It's recorded with the county, so that.
right, so they wouldn't be able to, they would have to live with the shorter property there, which would, may not allow them to use the property like they wanted to. So it's almost, if you do that, you're kind of tying up that landowner that signs that say, you'll really never be able to sell this property.
Oh, I'm sure they'll be able to sell it. But yeah, there's an agreement on the land, yes.
I'd like to make a point with that, if I could. I think a property with a lease on it that was pretty lucrative would be a very sellable item.
But that won't have a window on it, that property.
But it would still receive money, still receive payment from the project. So, to your point. The other item before I sit back down is.
Now, there's one thing on that too, that
Please.
it would go the other way if this zoning was passed and the towers were established and 10 years down the road, someone wanted to construct a house, they would have to adhere to the setbacks that were established. Is that correct?
Well, I suppose that's up to the planning board and zoning board that approves that house build, that would be after the project's built, right, so.
I think that's the question that was asked.
Yeah, that's.
Okay, yeah, so that, I don't know what the procedure is for building a house in town of Barry, I assume they come to you and they get a permit.
Well, there's variances and so forth that they have to adhere
Yeah,
to.
so they would be doing so,
Yeah.
you know, knowing how close they are to a wind turbine, and then that would be something that you would, I assume, address with them when they come. And so, having to continue to talk about setbacks, but do want to sit down. This is just a visual simulation showing turbines at the two different tip heights, right? 500 feet as currently listed in the town code, and then 600 feet in the exact same locations and distance, right? Visual simulation, John actually could probably tell you guys better how it works, but here's what it sounds like, right? Implants, image of turbines at scale in the image, and lists the dimensions and distance from the camera lens so that you can get a sense of scale. I think you'll see that essentially there's very little, it's hard to tell the difference between 500 and 600.
Can you put that up on, set it up there?
Yeah, should have brought another easel. How about this? Funny. Try this. This will also be at our open house. So,
The bottom one is 600?
yes, sir. It's our Article 10 application will speak at length about how visual simulation is, you know, runs on such and such software, and I can provide that information for you. But if you have questions about essentially how that works, I think it's pretty straightforward. You can kind of tell if you look like distance to treetop, but submit to you that it's difficult. And we've talked about this, of course, before. The Vestas V150 at 500 feet produces 3.4 megawatts of electricity. Is it rating, max rating, right? The Vestas V126, I'm sorry, this is the 500 foot. Vestas V126 produces 3.45 megawatts, right? The 600-foot version produces 4.2. So it's 20% more efficient machine, right? So,
And 600's on top.
Yeah.
that's right, yeah, I see that. Got it backwards.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is also up on our website, if you guys are. So, where can we go?
Well, are there other things that you want to change? Shadow flicker is one of them.
Yeah, sure, we can go point by point.
Sound.
Yeah. So I'll just go in order. But I would like to step past the definitions first. They'll be relevant as we go through the standards in section 103. So in section A4, we've proposed a change to language describing impact to air navigation, right? Should I read the original and then,
Yeah.
there's a lot of words here, so. Original ordinance reads, no individual wind energy generating unit shall be installed in any location where it may interfere with normal flight patterns at area airports and private airstrips. We propose to change that to say, shall not be installed in any location where it may pose a hazard to air navigation, area airports, or private strips. It's a small distinction, but that's the terminology that the FAA uses, who will do a formal review of these turbine points. So,
How do they define whether or not it's a hazard or not?
it's an interesting question because the FAA's review process is a little bit opaque to us, right? They consult with agencies within the FAA and DOD and then report back to us, right? We file turbine points and then they report back. But the FAA sets the rules for flight paths, right? And so if we give them a structure of a certain height, they can tell us if it's impacting minimum vectoring altitudes or, right, flight floors. The FAA also has the ability to change those rules to ensure safety, right? So that is the process that we're required to work through. Every turbine in America has to be approved by the FAA and DOD.
Isn't it something you would have checked before you started
Sorry?
out? Isn't it something you would have checked on though, prior to all this?
Part of the Article 10 process will involve providing that information to the state and the town and before Ben can get a certificate from the state for the project. We just wanted to make sure that the town language was the same as what the FAA would be telling us, because we're not the experts with the air navigation charts at our fingertips.
So, and so to take a step back, when we file our application, section 32 addresses local zoning.
31.
31, thank you, addresses local zoning. We would have to say, the town of Barry's current ordinance on air navigation says that turbines may not be installed where it impacts normal flight patterns. And that is somewhat vague. We have confirmed with the FAA that it poses no hazard to air navigation for their standards and submit that. So that's how that would play out if we had to seek a waiver, right? So, pleasure of the board.
John was first, sorry.
I'm concerned, and I think we shouldn't leave them out of the loop at all, the skydiving school down there. I think that they should be considered in any decision to change that. Because sometimes they have over 20 jumpers going at once.
I'm not sure that the rules for the airport are any different than the
Well,
rules for a skydiver.
Yeah. I don't know if it would pose additional hazard to them or not, would you consider it?
We've actually worked with the Pine Hill Airport to, answer their questions and hopefully set them at ease. Our turbines are more than 2 miles away from the airport, and so, in simple terms, there will be no
2
impact.
miles isn't a lot when you're jumping at over 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
The
Interesting, John,
applicant will
thanks.
be required in our intent to consult with airports and airstrips and any of these types of stakeholders, and those potential impacts would be discussed in an exhibit on the effect on transportation of the project. So we would cover that issue of the.
All I'm asking is that they be considered and maybe drawn into the conversation at least.
Go ahead, George.
I just wonder, normal flight patterns, is that we're trying to not take the crop dusters into account here, or is it putting it into hazard and say, okay, if you wanna do that, you're on your own, because it's your hazard?
Is that a GPS? Do they do it by GPS?
I don't think so. John? I don't think so.
Just what it's worth, when I read it says may pose a hazard to air navigation, that would, to me, that would mean any type of aircraft, not a commercial aircraft.
That's what I'm saying with the crop dusters.
Yeah, well, I would think that air navigation would include anything.
Hang glider, yeah.
Yeah.
And we propose the addition of both airports and private airstrips in that language. So it would be very inclusive, which would be more consistent with what the federal government is going to.
It's probably gonna be a case where a farmer that has a lease won't be able to utilize a crop duster to.
Yeah, I don't know how that would play out. I don't know that's one of the questions about the hazard, whether you're a hang glider or ultralight flyer or Sunday night, Sunday afternoon flyer or a crop duster. These things are all obstacles by their nature, which are hazards anywhere, just as much as a communication tower would be.
Sure.
I'm sure the crop dusters are up to the challenge,
No,
but that's where I wondered if.
That's not the point.
Yeah.
It is a hazard to air navigation for anyone who's flying below 500 or 600 feet. And be doable above 500 feet. So it's gonna be a hazard for any aircraft flying in this area, whether they're a crop duster or
This is frankly why we originally proposed just to adopt the FAA's review as the standard itself, because, they both set the rules and make the determination of hazard, and allow for construction of structures
Sure.
within the rules and to change the rules to allow for it, so.
So, they obviously put towers everywhere.
Yes.
Not very many around here, but there are other more populated places where there are towers all over, and they're on navigational maps, they're marked. Does that mean your towers are gonna be marked on navigational maps?
Yes,
They would have to be if they're above 500 feet, right?
yes. Yeah, so the 500-foot limit is something we've talked about before, right? So any structure over 500 feet has to be reviewed by the FAA and DOT. Sorry, Lee.
It's actually over 200.
200 feet, right, has to be reviewed. 500 feet is a second standard, right? Thank you, Laura. So, I'm gonna go to the next question, we can come back to the
So that's how they're handling this, just like they would a communication tower or anything, they're just
or
gonna.
a skyscraper, or anything,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's actually the same portion of the code of federal regulations that you have to go through to get the structure evaluation and determination from the FAA, that you would for a cell tower.
Okay, that's all.
Yes. Next, section A6, current ordinance says the use of guy wires is prohibited except in the case of wind energy conversion unit / wind turbine, parentheses, small project. We've proposed to add to that to say this provision does not apply to transmission infrastructure or wind measurement towers unless otherwise feasible. There are certain structures on the substation itself that connect the substation to the existing grid line that will require a guy wire within the substation block. But Ag and Markets, as a practice, requires us to bury line in ag fields wherever possible. That's something that they review stringently. You want to talk more about that, but so wherever possible, we will bury our line. But would like an acknowledgement that there's at least one instance where it is not possible to bury it when it's going up to the grid itself.
What about transmission lines that would run along the roadway? That
We're
Apex
not,
would install?
that's a good question. So that kind of speaks to John's question. We don't have rights to the roadway like the town does. In areas where we cross a roadway, we would plan to bore under it, right? So if we have leased ground on both sides.
But I was wondering about locations where you installed transmission lines that were not underground. Or are you stating that any transmission line whatsoever you have on this project will be underground?
Well, we have a prerogative to bury them wherever possible, so.
So what their proposed edit to the local law does is just clarify that likely the intention of that provision was to apply to the wind turbines themselves, that you wouldn't want guy wires supporting the wind turbine itself. You would want those to be the monopole towers. We wanted to clarify that there may be circumstances wherein we would need to use guy wires for transmission or for a meteorological tower. But as the language reflects, that would not be our first preference. It would only be, if it's not possible to do it any other way, or
We'd have to make that case.
if there's a state agency that's telling us you can't bury this here, then that would be a situation where we would need to propose something of that nature.
Even if it's a state agency though, if you have a land lease with a property owner which has property adjacent to a state, county, town road, and you choose to put that overhead at your own discretion, maybe because of whether it be because of cost or whatever reason it may be, you'll have the ability to put it overhead and utilize guy wires if you choose. Is
If
that
it's
correct?
required. It's not if we choose, right? We have to make the case that that's absolutely required.
Okay. Because the reason I'm asking that, and I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but every time you drive into our town, you drive down Route 98 and there's about a dozen poles that are ready to tip over.
Yeah.
And the power company and the utility companies don't seem to care too much about it. And it's an eyesore. You notice it.
Oh, yeah. That one was gonna go on near Wes's house there.
Just as a matter of syntax, wouldn't it be more clear to say unless otherwise feasible or required, this provision does not apply to?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure, that would.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll make that change.
You
Go ahead,
mentioned
John.
transmission lines, so, my question is this, and we still have, I don't think we still have a map that really indicates where each turbine is going. Now, we've got those high-tension lines that run right through Berry down there. And some of the areas that are proposed for turbine sites are right in the vicinity of those lines.
So the setbacks apply to those transmission lines as well.
That's right, those transmission lines have their own parcel, right? It's a long parcel that goes all the way through town, so we have a 1.5 times tip height setback to that.
From any transmission lines that are existing?
Well,
And that
interesting,
includes the ones that go down the road. See, what I would like to see is a picture of it, where there are transmission lines run, or some type of diagram, and where the turbines are gonna go adjacent to those. And the approximate yardages or measurements from those lines. Because if we're adding, already got a ton of transmission lines everywhere, and then we're throwing turbines and then guide wires and other things in the locale, I'm concerned that could in itself create a hazard for any type of aircraft such as Mercy Flight. I know already that it's going to delay them in landings in the local area, because they can't fly through those turbines. So, are we adding to something that's already there? I mean,
I don't think that's really relevant to what we're talking about right now, but
But we're talking about the,
I can't address that.
Transmission lines is where I was.
we're talking about the,
Transmission lines and stuff.
Yeah, we're talking about that.
lines.
so, the guide wires are not something that you really require in the areas outside of the transformer stations.
Yeah, there are some instances where we would be required, necessitate overhead transmission. One would be if Ag and Markets, took issue with a collection route and said, the only way we'll approve this is if you do overhead transmission. They have that authority, right? In certain instances where perhaps you were crossing a large wetland or something, right? You may need
For a
overhead.
sensitive cultural resource. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why that might need to be proposed. I think ultimately what we were just asking for is some flexibility to be able to make the case that in a specific instance, it was appropriate without there being, a wholesale ban on guy wires in all instances.
That's right, and the proposed language would require Apex to make the case that it's necessary.
Correct.
There has been above-ground transmission lines installed in the last 4 or 5 years on windmill, on energy system for windmill projects in Wyoming County, totally above ground.
So that would have not been reviewed by the
Would
site.
not have been Article 10.
At Casadega, you worked on Casadega, so just interrupt me if I'm getting this wrong, but at Casadega, Ag and Markets took issue with a particular collection route, decided that a farmer didn't have the proper turning radius in his field, or something, yeah, and then required overhead transition. Their reasoning wasn't very strong, but that's their prerogative. I shouldn't say that it wasn't strong. I didn't fully understand it.
There was a case made by another agency that their preference would be overhead in that instance. But again, the applicant in that situation has to explain why that's necessary, explain what the factors are, and ultimately why it was selected over a perhaps less visually intrusive method of installation.
So, 8AC is what we discussed over here, so. I'd just like to read the exact current ordinance. Says turbines must be sited at a distance not less than 1.5 times the tip height of the turbine, as measured from the property lines of the parcel on which said unit is to be sited, right? So that essentially requires a parcel to be 1,800 feet by 1,800 feet, or 1,400, whatever, right? And then for that turbine to be sited immediately in the middle of it, which is not preferred. It also removes the practice of setback waiver, which benefits the adjacent landowner, allows them to benefit from the project. And so our proposed change is simple. We insert or replace from the property lines on which the parcel, on which said unit is to be sited with, from non-participating property lines. So that is to say that if an adjacent landowner, by contract, filed with the county, agrees to have a parcel, or a turbine sited on an adjacent parcel closer to their property boundary, then we can do that. So this is a very important one. I want to make sure that we have all the time to discuss.
And I just wanted to emphasize that this does not change the setback to someone who does not have a contract with the company, that you're still required to do the same setback that the town established in 2008. It only allows for a reduction of that setback if someone has a contract with you.
Just a curiosity, Ben, how many sites are impacted by this? That wouldn't be there?
On our preliminary layout that's been filed, most.
Most of them require this.
Most.
It's not a one tower type situation.
No.
So you knew this coming in?
Yes. Yeah, like I said, before Casadega, we would have expected that the siting board would demonstrate a willingness to exercise its authority to grant waivers. That has not been, as we've learned that, we've come to this board, and that's what brings us to you today. The only other point I want to make before I shut up about this is that the standard at Casadega was smaller, right? It's 1.1 times the time?
Yes, the local laws in the towns, the Casadega project was cited and actually has smaller setbacks than the area, but had no objection to various existing setback for non-participants. It was only the desire for a different, for flexibility on the part of the
Theirs was, if I'm not mistaken, 1.5 times the turbine tip blade height from the substation, from the generator lead line, 1.1 times the turbine tip blade height from gas wells. I don't even know if we have it in preliminary. 550 feet from public roads, 550 feet from state lands, 550 feet from non-residential structures, 1,500 feet from non-participating residences, 1,000 feet from participating residences.
Is that from
550 feet from non-participating.
That's the
parking.
Casadega certificate and condition. So a certificate is issued with standards attached to it, right?
Right.
And your existing standards exceed, if I'm not mistaken, all of that, so.
So it's just, so in general, in the process, these things can be litigated in front of the siting board. The siting board makes the ultimate decision, and at least with Casadega, we have some published standards that have been adopted and found to be reasonable by the siting board. So 1.5 times the tip height at this point is basically the standard, although, as I said, one of them is 1,500 feet from non-participating residences.
Which we also respect.
Is that from their property line?
No,
Non-participating?
it would be to their home, discussing residences.
Well, yours only says 1.5 times tip height, as measured from non-participating property lines. It doesn't really give anything as far as non-participating residents.
Right, because there's also a setback to homes on the books, which we're not touching, right? Which is greater than this setback, right? So you couldn't be 900 feet from a home anyway. You couldn't be a tip height and a half from a home. You have to be greater than that by the existing standard, which we're not touching. In fact, we're exceeding by 50%.
So
A
right
distance
now,
not less than 1,000 feet from any existing residence, commercial
I'm just
building.
asking.
Existing community
That's
residence.
what's on the books.
8 feet
8
is
feet.
the,
I'm not,
But I'm just saying Casadega says 1,500 feet from non-participating residents.
I'm not.
Residents,
not property owners.
No, that's an additional setback requirement.
But I am.
But I would think if it's a non-participating property line, it's, assuming the 600-foot towers, we're talking about 900 feet, right, from a non-participating property line, and 1,000 feet from any existing residence. I'm just saying Casadega seems to be a little bit more stringent.
I'm sorry?
I said Casadega seems to be a little bit more stringent.
In what way?
Where it says, from the setbacks, that it's 1,500 feet from non-participating residences.
That is more stringent than what's on your books, but we applied the same standard. If you wanted to change your existing standard to homes, we would, to 1,500 feet, we would be happy to comply with that. So we didn't feel the need to include it in our proposal because we comply with some already.
You'd be willing to make that 1,500 then?
Yes,
Equal to Casadega?
yes, that's the setback we use to all homes in our preliminary layout and everything that we've done, in all of our modeling already, so.
Can I ask a question?
George has a question.
Has anybody been down to Arkwright and the Casadega project that he's talking about? Okay, I have. There's in the hills. I think they're smaller towers, I'm not 100% sure. We went down there to see what they were, but they weren't up and running yet. A lot of overhead. But can you get waivers from, they have I forgot what the lady called it, but if you didn't have one on your property, but adjoining property owners, if you signed, yep, I want it, I want to get paid for it, you got $1,000. Did that affect the zoning for those homes,
Well,
if they signed that?
the Arkwright project that you're referring to is actually not an Article 10 project, believe it or not. The Casadega project hasn't been constructed yet. There's also an Arkwright wind project that went under the seeker process some time ago. Both are in the town of Arkwright. It makes it a little bit complicated, right?
Yeah, okay.
So the towers that you saw were a seeker permitted process.
Okay.
I don't know offhand what the town's requirements were for that project. But what you're referring to, I think, is referred to as a good neighbor agreement.
Thank
So
you, yes.
you have an adjacent parcel and you sign a contract with the adjacent parcel to say, I'm fine with you having the wind turbine 200 feet closer to my property line than what's in the code.
Okay, so
That
that
person-
could take effect under that.
Yeah,
All right,
so,
because there was, I know there was one that I have the ladies, I'm gonna give her a call in a while and see how she's doing. I understand exactly why she put it, but it was close. It was really close to her home.
and again, I can't speak to that specific project, but I do know that Article 10 is a much longer and more complicated process, and you will have to provide
But that's interesting that
excruciating
they're doing,
detail.
they got two projects going on it.
Sure, and I can understand the confusion too, because it's, who would have thought, but.
Yep.
Not changing the subject, I hope not. Since we're talking about properties and adjacent property owners, what's going to happen to a person who has property adjacent to a turbine? They want to build a building or another house on their lot,
We
and it
just-
reduces the setback.
We just talked about that.
We discussed that.
Or then
And the answer was, the way I understood it is that whoever is going to build the structure will have to adhere to the setbacks that exist for the zoning, for the wind
So
towers.
they would not be able to build
That's
on their
correct.
own property.
If they buy a piece of property that has a current wind lease, they're gonna have to go with the conditions of the wind lease they have. And if they own a piece of property that has a wind lease, they're gonna have to adhere to the conditions that the wind lease
It's
has.
no different than any other zoning law. If somebody buys a piece of property, they are on notice that if there are zoning ordinances in effect in the municipality, they have an obligation to know what they are.
Yeah.
So that if a person already owning the adjacent land decides to build something additionally on their property, they would have to adhere to ABEX setbacks for the turbine.
They would have to, but they'd already have to, would have already have to adhere to them because they signed a lease. Because they're an adjacent property that already
Well, I'm
was.
talking about non-participating property owners
Yeah.
who have not signed a lease. That's my concern,
Oh.
Tom.
So
That's why I asked.
non-participating property owners who did not sign a lease, who want to construct a building on their property, but don't have a lease.
On the parcel.
And if they want, meaning if they want to build something closer than 1.5 times the tip height, presumably that would not be permitted, so.
So then they would lose some of the, they would lose some of the availability of their own property.
Yeah, well, again, they'd have to go to the planning board and ask for permission to build this new town, right? Or this new house.
Well,
But it appears as we're speaking right now that would be the case, that they would lose some of the use of their own property. Would they be compensated for any of that?
I just want to point out that the proposal that we've made would set the turbine back at least 1.5 times the tip height from any non-participating property line. There would not be longer setback for residents on the books. So the residents, and you have setbacks for residences as well. So the resident couldn't build on the property line anywhere in the town. They would have to set it back in accordance with your law put them, I mean, we can look at it, but that would put them well beyond anywhere where they would have a residential setback that they would need to.
There's no issues here with non-participating landowners. The issue has to be with, I think, if I understand this clearly, has to do with adjacent properties that are both participating. One gets sold, whoever buys that piece of property benefits from the fact that they're participating in the project, but also is negatively impacted by where they can build on there to stay away from the tower. Is that correct?
They would have known that when they purchased.
How would they,
Unless they, I assume that they could still apply for a variance, you know, under the zoning law, which would have to be reviewed by the zoning board of appeals.
So I think it's clear,
okay,
to me anyway, if I understand that correctly.
I think you do, yeah. It's not very commonsensical, thinking through, but yes. I'm going to go to B1 if I can. Section B1 discusses noise level standards, and we have proposed to include the standards adopted at Casadega, which are a bit more detailed. There are 6 points, and it's probably not worth it for me to read through them all without stopping right now. This issue probably warrants in itself some special consideration, a meeting or whatever you guys say.
Just reading through that, because, you know, we had talked about this
Yes.
earlier, but I just think that at some point, there ought to be something that says, all right, these are the standards, all right, or other standard adopted by the Board on electric generation siting in the environment. In other words, if they're going to adopt a standard that is different than, I mean, this is the first one we've seen.
Yes.
From the siting. So if they adopt something that's different, that might be more stringent, although I don't know if that's gonna happen or not, but we should have something that says, look, it's gonna be this, or if the siting board says, no, you've gotta comply with something that's more restrictive, then it's gotta be more restrictive.
We're willing to comply with what the siting board.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that if this amendment is adopted, we should have some language in there that.
Yeah,
And I think we've made this point before, but Heritage will have to submit all of the evidence necessary to show that it's selected appropriate noise setbacks and, you know, that there's not going to be undue noise impacts in the community. So that the Article 10 process will involve a lot of this conversation. I think this is just the specific limitations that are a little bit more specific than what's in the law right now.
Yeah.
The law doesn't make a distinction, for example, between residences, both participating and non-participating, which we've proposed some limits for, as well as some other issues that have come up in other cases, prominent tones and vibration, being two of them that aren't covered by your current code.
So Lance, you would propose to just add a clause at the end that says, unless otherwise conditioned in the Article 10 certificate?
Well, but I would say at this point, unless, for such other standard adopted by the Board of Electric Generation, citing the environment that is more restrictive than what's proposed here.
Okay, we should like follow up maybe tomorrow and
Yeah.
clarify that language. Yeah, that,
I don't know if that will
Frankly,
happen, but, you know.
yeah, well, you
No,
know,
it's a fair point.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And Ben will be obligated to comply with whatever standards in his certificate, or the certificate would be taken away, so.
But just as an example,
Yeah.
right now, the standard is, for non-participating properties, it's 45, right, decibels, daytime, right? For non-participating and 55 for participating, and there's a separate standard for nighttime, 40 and 50. I don't know if they would go, let's say they said that from now on, it's gonna be 40 and 45 or something like that. I don't know that they would, but,
Yeah.
I I mean, I assume at some point it has to be consistent with what these turbines are engineered to do, you know, you can't put an artificially low decibel level if they don't function at that level, but my understanding is that these levels here are designed to minimize any complaint of noise from neighboring properties, that they're low enough that that shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, it's important to understand that the noise levels set in these standards are measured to outside of a home, so inside of a home, depending on the construction of the home, it's obviously going to be much quieter. And as a matter of communicating with the public, there are a number of free apps for your phone that will measure dBA in a room at any given time. And encourage you all to download one. It's pretty interesting to see how dBA changes. We're just sitting here in the silence, probably 40, 45 dBA. So it's important to contextualize this. So,
They're pretty low levels. You get down to 40.
Excuse me?
it's pretty low.
Yeah, there you go.
That's called white noise, right?
Yeah.
Well, that comes from the transmission of the electric and the high intensity lights, so.
Lights don't put
If
out-
you have that in the average home, I'm sure it would go up.
The one thing, when they do those, sound measurements, do they do them in different, climate conditions? Like in a heavy wind or slow, how do they?
yeah, so, may I?
Yeah, yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, so ambient, we have to do 2 ambient noise studies, which factor into the actual like layout that we come up with, right? To measure ambient sound, existing sound, and then we can measure how that would be changed by turbine. 2 weeks in the summer, 2 weeks in the winter, and the points that we choose have to be defended in the application, so, yeah, we have to choose, you know, representative points throughout town, different, not just geographical, but, you know, one next to a cornfield, one next to a swim field, right? One next to a roadway, one next to, you know, nothing, so.
What about on days when there's a 30-mile-an-hour wind and days with 55-mile-an-hour wind?
They can fluctuate pretty soon.
And there are rules for the modeling. They're actually very, very extensive. I can send them to you, at least what's been proposed in the preliminary scoping statement that Heritage has put forth. But there are rules about excluding anomalies. If there's a train that goes by once in the entire time that you're sampling, you usually take that out so that it doesn't artificially inflate your numbers.
And I think, aren't these averages over the course of
Yeah.
a year? So it's not
Generally.
just measurement as of one specific date and time, but they have to average this over the course of a year to be underneath those sound guidelines.
Standards, yeah.
Yeah, and it accounts for things like very high gusts of wind. And all of the modeling has to look at that.
So I know that's one that we'll come back to. Since sound measurement is, you know, in-depth science, I would ask that you like submit questions to me by email so I can consult with our sound consultants who will be preparing the application with us, and don't rely on me to try to answer myself. I'm going to move on unless you have other questions on sound. The proposed change to section F is simply to amend the tip height cap from 500 feet to 600 feet, which we've spoken about. I prepared this board and happy to answer any other questions you have. It is important to understand though that, you know, we permit to a tip height rather than a specific turbine. So the Vestas V150 comes out to exactly 591 feet and some change, right? And so that 1.5 times tip height setback has to be applied to that, right? So GE makes a comparable machine, and Siemens makes a. But we use Vestas typically during development as an example because Vestas puts their brochures on their website. You can Google Vestas V150 and find a lot of good information in front of the brochure. So it might be helpful to you. Moving right along. Section H. I'll read it to you, and our amendment is simple. So as it currently reads, accessory structures features are accessory structure facilities. Transmission facilities and/or buildings shall be located along roadways, below ridge lines, or behind vegetation to screen such facilities and/or buildings from visibility. If such a building is to be located in or alongside of an open field facility, the building shall be landscaped in such a way as to blend such facility or building in with the surrounding environment. And we simply ask to add, to the extent possible, that you know, we blend a substation with shrubbery. It's a difficult standard to meet. Question I'm gonna push on.
That's just about the buildings. One of the groups suggested buildings that are consistent with the features of our town, like barns.
That we do what?
That they make a, for example, a substation facility, they make
Look like a
it
hamburger.
barn.
Make it look like a barn. If it says to the extent possible, I'd be very comfortable with that. I don't think it'll.
For the substation too, we keep in mind that we have to follow whatever the utility will want and whatever the state allows for a substation design, so.
Not gonna look.
Substations are pretty sparse, aren't they? Just
Yeah.
fence and transformers.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It would be standard.
This would be a concrete steel structure.
What is there?
Well,
What am I missing?
No, I'm just, I've never heard of making substations look like barns. That's-
Yeah.
that's really odd.
The one thing about, Ben, is about the statement about, and just understand where I'm coming from here, that to the extent possible,
Mhm.
to the extent possible, who's gonna determine what extent is possible? Would it be Apex? Would it be the town board? Would it be the siting board?
So,
Please go ahead. Please.
in the Article 10 procedure, what will happen is that we will have to put in an application, it'll be probably about 8 or 10 binders, more information than you'd ever want. If we had a proposal where we needed to make an exception because we couldn't, to the extent possible, comply with a local requirement, we would need to explain why we were doing that. And we would need to justify that to the town and the other parties, including the Department of Public Service, who will scrutinize this with the finest tooth comb that is available on the market. The town also has the opportunity to put in any evidence or testimony that they feel applies with regard to compliance with the laws. So, for example, if the town disagreed with our position that we had done something to the extent possible, there's like statutory protection for them to be able to make that case to the siting board. And then the siting board would decide what was possible and was not possible. So we would have to make the argument, but it would have to hold up to everybody else's scrutiny. So it's certainly not simple.
Well, next to our farm, on our farm, well, it's not on our farm anymore, but fiber optic is right there, the other side of what used to be my mother-in-law's house. All they did was, and it's a big substation, all kinds of transformers and whatever else. They have just one side of it by the house. On this side, they have pine trees. Nothing on our side, we can still see it.
Yeah.
It's farmland from the inside out. So, yes, the town didn't require anything for that evidently, so, 'cause pine trees is all that it was required on that one.
I've got a question. How many substations do you think you'll need?
One, right? A collection, there's a collector sub right next to so I guess technically there are two as part of the same facility, to answer your question exactly. One that we own, one that the utility will own. It's kind of like we both have a switch, right? They take the electricity we give it, so, but it will be one location.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this section also applies to things like if there was an operations and maintenance building, which if that's a 1 or 2 story structure, may not be possible to screen that. So that would be an example of how the to the extent possible language would be helpful.
Now, is the substation a building, or is it a set of transformers like we already see?
Yeah, Jesse dropped by
That's
them
what
every
it's
day.
gonna be, and there'll be fences around it and whatever, so it's,
The town's gonna have to decide at some point which of these things they wanna have listed to the fullest extent possible.
Which is what things?
whichever of these things.
Of these,
Because we've only been through about 8 or 10 of these issues, and 7 or 8 of them so far have to the fullest extent possible.
yes.
So at some point, we're gonna have to decide which of these we wanna say do not have that wording at the end.
Yes.
And which of them do have that wording at the end.
See how fair?
Yes. In the interest of time, press on. The next one is important. Section J refers to shadow flicker. Following the existing verbiage, shadow flicker, the wind energy conversion system shall be designed such that shadow flicker from an individual wind energy conversion unit will not fall on any specific area of a roadway or a portion of a residential structure in excess of 25 hours per year. If an individual residence is being impacted by multiple wind energy conversion units, the cumulative effect of said impact shall not exceed 25 hours per year. If shadow flicker exceeds these conditions, the source wind energy conversion unit shall be shut down until offending conditions is remedied. So there are a couple of changes that we've proposed here. Lance and Laura, I know you guys have spoken about this. Beyond, you know, first, the standard at Cassadaga applied was 30 hours, not 25 hours per year. We've proposed to strike the clause in the first sentence that says any specific area of a roadway or a portion of a residential structure in excess, and include the verbiage, any non-participating residence or business in excess of 30 hours per year. So it removes roadway as a location to be measured for shadow flicker. Shadow flicker and noise in our studies are measured from receptors, sensitive receptors. And so going back to the first section of this proposal definitions, we've introduced the term sensitive receptors, right? Which is to say, you know, these are buildings where people would experience continual, you know, either noise or shadow flicker, and so that's what you can measure a single point from. What else am I missing here? Laura, standard apply to Cassadaga was 30, not 25, detail previous count. I was just gonna make the point that in our Article 10 application, we actually have to produce a calendar showing shadow flicker impact on each home in the project area. So that will be a measurable point. We'll be able to deal with
Just so
your
you're
house.
aware, I know that in the proposals that were submitted by other individuals, they wanted a provision that said there would be no shadow flicker on any non-participating residential properties. So I think for purpose of clarification, you need to tell these people if that's even physically possible. That you can you eliminate shadow flicker on a non-participating residence? or
No, I don't think you can say that you can eliminate it.
I know that the Cassadaga standards didn't differentiate. I mean, what I'm saying is that I thought that the shadow flicker was the same restriction for both participating and not participating residences, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that there are two.
I believe there were two separate standards, but
I'd have to
I will have to
I'd have
look
to
it
go
up.
through that in your
I
hand.
apologize.
This verbiage here is saying that there is no protection for participating properties, right?
Right, there is a standard though, I believe. I have to find it here.
Shadow flicker, their stance was, shadow flicker caused by wind turbine operators shall be limited to a maximum of 30 hours annually at any participating residential receptor. But I don't think there was any, limitation for participating, so I was wrong. I don't think there was anything for participating residences located on participating property.
Yeah.
The basis for having a standard that limits shadow flicker is really, it's an annoyance issue. It's, someone's not participating in the project and they're getting over 30 hours a year of shadow flicker. There's a potential for some annoyance there. That's why the standard exists. The position is typically that if someone has a lease with the company, that annoyance factor is not always there. They voluntarily entered into an agreement.
Let's put it this way, they're compensated for it.
Correct. So, I mean, we can look at what might make sense, and what was presented in the Cassadaga project, but it's really, more than anything else, it's reduction of annoyance for people who aren't participating.
This, like the sound one, is one where we're happy to tie it to, back to the siting board, decision ultimately. This will have to be litigated fully with all the agencies. And will require, like I said, an in-depth study from us showing visual or shadow flicker impact on every single sensitive receptor, homes in the town area.
But as far as this town is concerned, this verbiage really impacts, changing this verbiage impacts participating people in participating parcels. Because they have no, whatever flicker they get, they have to deal with it. They're compensated for it, it's what they have to deal with. Where our original verbiage, they protected them as well as non-participating.
That's true.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Our original verbiage protected.
Everybody.
Participating and not participating.
In all roadways.
Just so that we all understand.
How'd they do the roadway issue in Casadega?
They didn't even mention that.
You can't,
have
you
that?
can't measure
No.
shadow flicker to every single point on a roadway.
Right.
Tom, George, has a question?
George has-
I just wanted to, if this is even possible, when Lance said that some of the recommendations were they didn't want shadow flicker at all, and that's probably not physically possible, but if you know from your studies that it's gonna be 25 to 35 minutes, whatever, per day, with the sun at the right height, can the windmills be computerized to shut down during that flicker time and have it be zero?
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting question. So that's the last clause, I think, also speaks to that here. In the current verbiage, it says, if shadow flicker exceeds these conditions, the source wind energy conversion unit shall be shut down until the offending condition is remedied. Until the offending condition is remedied is unclear to us what a remedy looks like, decommissioning or curtailment. So we've proposed that we include the words, or the applicant shall be required to take those other measures specified in the facilities Article 10 certificate conditions, which would discuss
Right.
remedy, right?
Right, what will have to happen is that a discussion of potential mitigation of shadow flicker impacts will need to be made in the application. So what could you do? First of all, the modeling is done in an extremely conservative manner that assumes that that your house is basically built of glass. It doesn't account for where your windows are or where you would be relative to the turbine, whether there would actually be trees in the way that would be preventing that shadow from occurring on your property at that time. It takes that very conservative estimate and then talks about, okay, well, what does this person's house actually look like? Do they have south-facing windows? Do they have, a bunch of silos in the way that would prevent that from occurring? And if there is an impact, what can we do to mitigate it? Can we talk about a curtailment regime? Can we talk about other types of measures that could be taken? That all has to be laid out. I think what we're just advocating for is a limitation that's consistent with the science and consistent with what the state has accepted as reasonable. And then we'll have to make our case from there.
Right.
My question was, though, is the technology available
To do what, sorry?
to
Mitigate.
computerize during that time that you know that there's gonna be shadow flicker, because the science is there, they know when it's gonna happen, to have that shut down during that time, computer just said, okay, back on. And it would eliminate shadow flicker. I just wonder if the technology is available, not that you're gonna do it, but
This would depend on which turbine we end up using too.
Yeah, we can look into it.
I'd have to dig a little bit. Curtailment is a mitigation, what's the word here? Strategy, thank you, used in other, like around bats, right, bat protection. So it exists, that the technology to curtail it exists, the technology to predict shadow flicker times on a calendar exists. So,
Right.
Tell you that much.
and they had like you ever been getting into birds and stuff.
The problem with that, though, is time of the year. Spring is different where the sun is versus now where the sun is.
Yeah.
Right, but they had it all, they know when the shadow
I
flicker's
know,
gonna
but to
be.
get that programmed in,
They already have it. I mean, they know
Yeah.
when, how much, that's why they can say you're gonna be under 25.
My question would be then to add to that if I could. What if you have 3 or 4 turbines that are producing the same effect on the same home?
That's a good question. The verbiage actually does speak to that, to say that the cumulative effect of said impact shall not exceed 30 hours per year, so.
So we're talking about a line of turbines that, you know, as the sun travels, could be affecting one person's or 2 persons' homes for a good part of the day.
Can't exceed 30 hours per year though.
Hmm?
It
One
can't
or
exceed,
multiples can't exceed.
can't exceed 30 hours a year.
So a different way to say it might be that a single home can only experience 30 hours per year of shadow flicker cumulatively, all the turbines included.
Right.
So not just of any one turbine. Cumulatively.
I didn't hear that.
But we may have
And any,
technology
that to say that any one home can only experience 30 hours of shadow flicker cumulatively.
Is that law, is that written somewhere, or is that?
That's in the
health
exact-
law, or is that just the
The cumulative, yeah, the cumulative phrases.
standards set by the wind organizations?
No,
Because
that,
I didn't read it anywhere in the law, and I'm not familiar with that at all. But what I'm concerned about is, like I said, could one homeowner be affected at different parts of the day and run into a good part of the day with shadow flicker? Have you guys, can I ask just one question? Have you watched any of the videos of the shadow flicker in people's homes, inside and out? I'm just curious. If
I
you're
haven't.
familiar, if anybody on the board is familiar with
I
that,
haven't.
what it's like to live under those conditions. I think it'd be a good watch.
Well, again, the conditions, I'm just reading what per year cumulative effect on any receptor, so,
right.
and a non-participating receptor.
But it's the wind industry standards, sir. I don't think it's law anywhere.
It's,
I just read that from the law.
well, our law right
It
now
is
is
that-
25
it is
Yeah,
hours per
cumulative,
year.
yeah, your law does discuss cumulative.
The town law.
Yes, Tom.
And they're proposing a new definition that's a sensitive receptor, which is a non-participating residence, hospital, care center, school, library, church, cemetery, public campsite, summer camp, public park, New York state land.
Your concerns are taken into account.
And the current law doesn't protect any of those other things you just read. It only applies to residences. So it would expand what you have to protect those other types of receptors, like hospitals and schools.
I got a question. We're talking about this whole operation on flicker and so forth. I reported, and I give flicker, how many days or months is it gonna be before that's correct?
That's a good question. There's a complaint resolution plan as part of the application. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So one of the things that the applicant will have to provide in the application is a comprehensive complaint resolution plan that talks about how they're gonna address any type of complaint from anybody in the community. So what are you gonna do if you have someone who's saying, you're exceeding the noise standards or the shadow flicker standards at my home? There would be a whole list of measures that need to be taken, reporting requirements, so that the company has to provide that information to the state and say, we've received X number of complaints about this issue. We've done the following things. We've followed up within this period of time. It will be very detailed, and it will explain to you exactly what your recourse is and what their obligations are to address your complaints and the
That's
time.
fine, but how long is it gonna take?
Well, yeah,
You'll have
that
to
would be-
address that in the complaint resolution.
So
plan.
we could look at what Casadega
Right.
did and answer what they use to determine.
From everything I've read, the people that are complaining, the resolution is just not coming.
Casadega hasn't been built.
Pardon me?
Casadega hasn't been built.
I mean, this
How could they
department will have
I'm
to.
talking about the ones that are already built where there are complaints that arise.
The proposed amendment says if shadow flicker exceeds these conditions, the source wind energy conversion unit shall be shut down until the offending condition is remedied. So seems to be there's an immediate reaction in terms of shutting it down until there's a resolution. I'm not Judge Brett Kavanaugh, I can't exactly tell you, but
The
I think that would be
certificate,
the logical interpretation.
the certificate for the project will spell out exactly what happens when you're out of compliance with the standard. So, and I think Casadega, in fact, there's a specification of the consequences of being out of compliance and getting a complaint and, investigating that complaint.
Can I, I know I'm asking. Can I ask one or two or all members of the board to review the complaint process that other communities are facing in regards to the turbines, the shadow flicker, the noise, and just see where they are down the road with the resolutions of those problems? I think that's an honest question.
I think it's a good idea. We should
Just to
see what
protect the people, you know,
see what the Casadega project has for complaint resolution.
Yeah.
and see if it's if the process is working, so to speak.
Well, again, it's not built yet, so
No, but to review what the actual process is, because it's not detailed in our law, but they have a
but
complaint resolution.
they have an obligation to prepare a complaint resolution process that we would review
Yes,
as with the siting board to make sure that we're
Yes.
happy with it.
yes.
I mean, ultimately, if there are conditions that are imposed that the siting board finds to be too restrictive or too lax, you know, they can make their own decision. But
I think maybe John is saying that it should be made public, what this complaint resolution process is?
it will be. I mean, I just don't, you can't, I haven't seen a local law, and correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen one that elaborates in detail what the complaint procedure is. It basically says you've got to have one, it's got to be workable, and then it's got to go through that Article 10 process.
And unfortunately, even if the local law did spell out that process, it would be a procedural requirement of the town, which is preempted by Article 10. So we get back into that issue of, you know, what can you do? It is required to be filed with the application. We can send you complaint resolution plans that have been filed both in the Casadega case and other applications that have been submitted, including Apex's affiliate, the GOLU project. There was a complaint resolution prepared for that, so.
My next question would be what oversight would community leaders have to ensure that the resolution is, or that the standards for the resolutions are met to satisfy the complaint?
I would think those things could be part of the agreement that's established, the host agreement. Is that true? I mean, those things could be established and there could be penalties imposed if they're not rectified in a fixed amount of time.
That's what I would be looking for. And possible compensation for the homeowners affected.
Yeah, I think some of the community host agreements I've read have incorporated a procedure, complaint procedure and resolution procedure, so same thing.
I just want to make sure that the town leaders aren't left out of the, you know what I mean? That they would have input or they would have jurisdiction, so to speak, with zoning and the other laws that we
Well,
have.
it's not gonna be the siting board, because in my understanding, once the siting board issues its operating permit, they
Okay.
basically surrender jurisdiction back to the town, so.
It's a weird question.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's enforcement
Yeah.
mechanisms at different levels. So we can certainly have that conversation. It's a fair question.
Okay, so that was pertaining to shadow flickers, but specifically, we got a little off topic, I'm gonna press on. That covers section 103, right? No, I'm sorry, there's one more, letter M, did we talk about that? Letter M pertains to construction hours, excuse me, so, current ordinance reads, that construction hours, no construction or reconstruction of wind energy conversion units shall begin before 6 AM, nor and after 8 PM, except in cases of emergencies. All maintenance of turbines shall take place within those same timeframes. We propose to amend to the following, except where certain, or to add this to that, to say, except where certain activities such as concrete pours or component deliveries or other conditions such as high wind speeds during the day may from time to time require deviation from these hours, but which activities will be limited to turbine sites and immediately surrounding area during any such period of deviation. Limitations of activities for which deviation from construction hours will be permitted. The procedures for providing notice thereof should be set forth as permanent or certificate conditions. That's directly from Casadega.
It's actually local law language that's common to a lot of the towns, but I think that the Casadega project addresses this issue. It's, there are certain cases in large construction projects where you would need to, like a continuous concrete pour, continue work past 8 PM. So there would be limited circumstances under which the applicant wouldn't be able to comply those would be spelled out very clearly in the application. There would be rules for how that could be triggered, and there would be an agreement on how the public would be notified if there was a situation where you needed to keep working past 8 for a very limited circumstance.
I think it's pretty straightforward. All right, pressing on. That covers section 103 standards. Section 104 deals with, I don't have the title header in front of me, deals with setback waivers, contemplates noise and other setbacks. I believe we just proposed to include the words or shadow flicker. Leases and setback waivers that have been signed already include discussion of noise and shadow flicker waivers. So submit that for your approval. I think we covered this already in the conversation. Section 105 and 106 deal with decommissioning and end of life cycle issues. Essentially, we rewrote 105 because we made so many changes to just include the decommissioning standards discussed at Casadega. And it's about a page and a half, so I'm not sure you want me to read it on its entirety. But as I said before, it's important to understand that we would be required to post a bond to cover the cost of decommissioning. That bond is reassessed on a regular basis. So, more money is added if necessary. The town at Casadega is conditioned that the town holds the note to that bond, right? And then beyond that, this section discusses circumstances in which a turbine would be decommissioned. In letters D and F through G, current zoning sets a standard that, I'm going to read this section for you. So, should the wind energy conversion system or any portion thereof not operate for a total period of 60 days in any 90-day period, the town shall notify the applicant that such a pending wind turbine or portion thereof shall be removed. And so we ask that you include the term continuous, so continuous 60 days, and amend 60 days to say 6 months, right? There are a number of reasons why a turbine may take 2 months to go from repairs to operational again, maybe waiting on parts. There are also factors kind of beyond the plant owner's control. A turbine may be curtailed by the grid operator or for other reasons. So there needs to be a little bit more flexibility there in order for us to run the plant. And so those are like the key changes we proposed. I said before, the decommissioning plan warrants its own attention as an element of the law. So if you'd like to have like a working session on that alone, I think that's worth our time.
You have it here, applicant and successors or signs are responsible for decommissioning all costs associated. In the current law, we say that any costs incurred by the town for any reason that exceed the amount of the financial surety are not covered by the surety, are completely responsibility of the applicant. And it goes on to say if the applicant is insolvent, such costs cannot be practically collected from the applicant, and such costs shall become a lien upon the property on which the costs were incurred. So that would be assessed like any other, tax. And I guess my position is that I think that language should be incorporated, even if the decommissioning language is adopted. I would think that should still be part of it.
Yeah, this is another section where we're going to have to litigate this fully through Article 10. So we'd be happy to tie this to the Article 10 certificate conditions again.
I don't know that Article 10 would specifically direct that the town had to pay for removal of a structure, part of a structure, and, Apex became insolvent. I know that their standards will automatically say, well, that's gonna be a lien on the property. So,
That's a good question. I think that might be something we could address also in the host community agreement, because we just have to be careful about how it's written so that it's not preempted. So if we can get that in the host community agreement maybe. But I mean, it's a fair point. I think the certificate talks about what happens if someone else needs to do the decommissioning for whatever reason, who's.
Do you have any objection to including that language from subdivision H as part of your redraft of the decommissioning plan? Or decommissioning section of the law?
No, I don't think we would object to that, do you? Yeah, the biggest reason we rewrote this was we didn't want it to be so littered with red lines that it was impossible to read, but yeah, I don't.
I just think, my personal view is that should be restated. I don't know. Maybe that gives the property owner an incentive to be sure that
which
company does its decommissioning properly, they don't get tagged or anything. Yeah, it's 350-105 subsection or subparagraph each.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I got a question about that. So if Joe Smith owns 400 acres, and he's got, he's making some copies of something for us, but, she's got to be here to take minutes, so
Yeah.
I guess we can start.
It just says the tax, but I think that's the typo area. I think
October 10th?
it says it's
You got the wrong one?
September 10th, October 10th, but I think it means October 8th today.
Oh, it says September. Oh, this one's October 10th.
Yeah, I think this means the day.
This is the last one.
So we'll get started. Guess we'll do the roll call first. Kurt? Willie?
Yes.
Wes?
Yes.
Kirk?
Here.
Carol? and Jean?
Yes.
Eugene. First is first on the agenda tonight is the meeting guidelines, and I'd like to go over a few rules about our meetings here that we'd like to try to maintain. Anyone wishing to address the planning board, we'd like to please be respectful of the 5-minute time limit. Please provide your full name, legal address before speaking. Please show respect for other speakers and allow them to talk without interruption. Please keep your subject matter to one topic, and priority will be given to town residents and landowners. So that's consistent with what the town board's been doing too. Anybody that wishes to, well, everybody should sign in to the meeting, and anybody that wishes to speak should strictly sign in. If you haven't done anyway, there's a sign-in sheet, I believe, in the corner. Is that right, Lee?
It's back over here.
Okay. So the meeting minutes from our September meeting. Can be reviewed and approved. There are a few things that we said at the September meeting, which I think are important to bring up, that may not be in the meeting minutes. I wanted to just go over those quick first. The solar zoning that we have started in, which has been in review for quite some time, we're gonna put that on the website for everybody to look at, to get an idea of what what it is and what it's about, and we haven't done that yet. We plan to do that soon. The copies of the proposed zoning changes for the wind energy towers have been distributed by Apex, and they're here for the residents to see at the town hall. And those are the things that we said we were gonna do last meeting that I just wanna make sure we followed up on, so.
Where are the copies for the wind? Out here on the table? Are
Pardon?
the copies for the wind out here on the table, the changes?
Not yet.
Exactly, is it, Tom, is it?
I will have it out there tomorrow.
Are there
Tomorrow?
amendments to our wind law, Gary, is that what it is?
No.
It's the proposed zoning changes proposed by Apex.
We'll
It's
be here tomorrow,
five
she
pages.
said. She's gonna have them ready tomorrow.
So we need a motion for approval of the minutes.
You might wanna, you got me in as Mr., you might wanna change that after. You want it official.
Okay.
I don't mean to be rude, Tom, but are we gonna have a public hearing on these proposed changes?
We are not having a public hearing tonight.
No, on the proposed changes,
The
next
pub-
month perhaps?
Well, we'll talk about that in just a minute, John.
Okay.
That's a good question.
I move we approve the minutes.
A second.
All in favor? Okay. So the planning board, the planning board is an advisory board that is making a recommendation on a specific issue in the town relative to wind energy. We're making a recommendation to the town board. We will not be holding a public hearing, nor will we be voting on any issue in regards to wind energy. We will only be making a recommendation to the town board. So, to answer your question about the public hearing, no, we won't be having a public hearing about the wind energy proposed changes. The town board will be though.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Will there be a mailer going out to every resident in Barry about the proposed changes?
That'll be up to the town board to decide that. On tonight's agenda, because of the old business that's listed, which is particularly the wind amendments, I'd like to change the agenda a little bit and deal with the new business first, so we don't have our applicant wait here all night. So I'd like to go over the 3 items of new business and then move on to the old business after that. So you guys don't have to wait up. So the first item of new business and before we get into that too, just, I don't think it would be fair tonight to suggest that we're gonna make any recommendation to the board relative to the wind energy changes, zoning changes. I'm not sure how others feel about that, but my recommendation would be that we don't make a vote on the issue tonight with our recommendation, so.
Just a point of order. I know that apparently the Apex submitted their proposed changes as a petition. Typically, under the law, that a decision by the planning board is supposed to be made within 45 days of petition, but two things. One, in my opinion, the petition wasn't filed the way it's required to be filed. Number two, I don't believe that Apex has standing to file a petition to amend the zoning law. I don't think they have a cognizant interest in order to give them standing. Number three, when I spoke to their attorneys, they assured me that they weren't going to, even if the 45-day rule applied, they were not going to hold us to it. So you get confirmation from representative from the law firm who's here.
Okay.
With regard to the standard issue, I think it is appropriate to let the new business go first, but I would like to address that at some point to the board.
Yeah, we can come back to that. Yep. So the first item on the agenda then for new business will be the application by Mr. Quill for the repair shop in the 198 in Berry. So this is consistent with our zoning, right? This kind of an operation is allowed. in the
Yeah,
zoning.
with a special use permit.
Yep.
The operation is, yes.
So
In the general business district.
you guys probably know the process, but we would review your application. We can't vote on it here tonight. We would confirm it's in compliance to go to the county, because it's on a state highway, it has to go to the county for their review. And then the county would make a recommendation to the town, and then the town would have a public hearing and vote on the application. So that's the process that we have to go by. I'm not sure when the next county planning board meeting is.
October 25th.
Okay.
What kind of business are we talking about?
Like a automotive repair shop? An automotive repair shop?
So I guess the one question I had is about the access, because this parcel is owned by, what's her name?
Sue Sherman.
She has a right-of-way to utilize Rice Road.
It's, yeah, I gave you a copy of
Yep.
of what he had, Joe has of the deed, which is not all of it, but a portion of it.
So
It
this is-
claims there's a,
This is a deed that they have to utilize the road to access the building.
right. And you also have a copy of the tax lot maps. in your-
Yep, they're in that.
Right, and you can, so you can see that.
Yeah, right away goes right by the
Yeah.
property.
And the property in question is 25.21, it should all be highlighted on your booklets. And then you can see the right of way. I don't know if you remember when Sue Sherman came in and they sold the property in the back, and there was a lot of controversy about that being landlocked, and even though it was just farming property. So my big question is this right of way being used for multiple pieces of property besides the one that Joe's looking at, and also the one, if it's, is that how it's deeded? I don't know. The survey would kind of tell us that, but unfortunately, we don't know.
Title search would tell it too, right, Lance?
I'm sorry?
The title search would tell whether or not there's a registered right away or a.
Should, I mean, there would normally be something in a deed for the property that address the right of way.
You want,
It's
Yeah, did you get a copy of the deed, Lance?
This one?
Yeah, I don't know, Lance has
No,
one.
I don't.
There.
Plus the tax map shows that the 120-foot right-of-way out was just of a certain length, correct?
You're talking about this tax?
Correct, yeah.
It doesn't necessarily say if it's for this property or the one in the back. That was my big question.
Well, this does refer to a right-of-way in common. Says, northerly along the westerly bounds of lot 38, the easterly bounds of Oak Orchard Road, a distance of 714.62 feet. The northwesterly bounds of land use the line of right. And that's the starting point. Northerly along the east bounds of Oak Orchard Road, a distance of 49.5 feet to a point. And goes east along a line parallel with the northerly bounds of land. 406.25 feet, south 49.5 feet, and then west 406.25 feet. So. I'm not sure. This is supposed to be north or south. I mean, it's not shown on the map itself, so. It doesn't really say, 'cause that doesn't really remember it. It looks like, because if you add up the tax map 25.1 and 25.2 on together, that's 406.25 feet. Which is exactly the measurement that we're talking about, so.
What would they have to do to clarify that?
Well, probably a survey map would be the most clarifying.
Would it be more economical to do a title search or a survey?
No, because the tile search is just gonna show you what's
Can
there.
show you that.
But it appears, it does appear that that is the right of way, that's north of that parcel outlined in pink, or shaded in pink, I should say. So from what I can gather from reading the description of the dimensions, that would appear to exist.
In that title, or in that deed, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what he was reading. It's fine,
Yeah, that's,
Yeah,
just make sure I found it, I apologize.
yeah. So because Sue Sherman, it's her property, she's just renting it out to him, she has the right of way there. It's been that, so would there be a question on, because she's renting it out to somebody else?
Well, Joe is applying for the permit, and she's provided him with a letter that's in the packet here that gives him the ability to get the permit through the town on her behalf. That,
Correct, she has, we have a notarized letter there. Sue owns both 64 and then 2521. So she owns both those pieces of property. I did recommend to her that she deed over 30 feet for a flag lot so that 25.21 would become flag lot, that was my recommendation, because my concern is that it's a landlocked, even though it has a right-of-way, it's a landlocked piece of parcel. It doesn't have any road frontage, and I question whether county's going to approve it or not.
But she still owns that.
She owns it, but they're two different tax lot maps.
Right, but she's
So-
owning it, so it isn't that she's selling it to him.
There is a potential to buy in the
If
future.
things work out down the road, we'd like to purchase it,
Right.
if it all works out in the prices of, in our affordability range.
But it doesn't matter whether she owns it or somebody else owns it, it's still a tax, it's still a landlocked piece of parcel. Just wanted to make the board aware of that, you know.
So we would have to, if he in the future is going to buy that, she would have to be sure that that's a flag.
That was my recommendation to do now. That was my recommendation to say. I don't know whether she is prepared to do that financially or personally.
Not sure either.
Yeah.
Would
We
Joe
can
have,
see what the board has, I'm sorry.
would Joe have to come back for another round of application if he purchased the property?
Only if the planning, no, not if he purchases the property, but if the town board approves subdividing lands, going to the planning board and they then subdivide that and give the 30 feet to the 25-21, then it would, but that has not been approved. That process has not been approved yet. And that's kind of how, this is a perfect example of why we need that kind of policy.
But there's nothing saying that he's going to be buying this, he's just trying it out at this point.
Correct, but it still doesn't make it, my question is it a legal piece of property because it's landlocked? That's my question, how county's gonna look at it. That's the big question. It's landlocked, it has no road frontage. That's the big elephant in the room.
The one recommendation we could make to Joe would be that if he executes the purchase of this eventually, that you get some
And,
right away with it.
and Joe and I have talked
Yeah.
about that, that was
Or
my
get some property,
recommendation.
whatever.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
to, you
In our
know,
best interest.
right,
The road's
As a
coming in.
landowner.
I mean,
Well, this is off of 98.
Right.
This is the laneway that goes down.
Right. So it's
Looking out in
coming
Joe's
in.
interest, if she just says, yeah, you can have the right of way, and they build back there, and then all of a sudden she says, there's too much traffic, I'm closing it down, is that her legal, and then they'd be landlocked? I mean, could that happen?
it's, yeah, that's more of a land question.
This is
No,
race road, so
it's
there's 98.
in the deed, so you've got a right of way in the deed that goes with the land, so it's not personal to the owner of the property.
Right, but you can get into, my concern was you can get into a sticky wicket with, let's say,
One property.
well, let's say his clients are traveling that road and damage it. Now is he responsible for spending money on a road that's not his? That was what I brought up to him.
Yeah, but
You
to
know, not that
maintain it
I'm
for-
not against the project,
Yeah,
I just
no.
want everything out in the open so everybody knows what they're getting into.
Mhm. Mhm. I understand the landlocked part of it.
Shelley,
Oh,
why
no,
don't
good, I agree.
Really? They have the right of way, but the question is whether the right of way complies with our zoning, because there's still no road frontage. The right of way is not a flag lot. If it becomes a flag lot, that complies with zoning, but a right of way doesn't necessarily. It's a matter of opinion whether that complies with zoning or not. That's the,
They're renting the property behind it?
We'd like to, yes,
yeah.
once we get a special use permit applied, then we would like to rent it.
What, and how this evolved is apparently in 1997, Rice Homes, the greenhouse that's in front was split off, and that's how it all got separated, and that was part of the parcel, which gave it road frontage, but then they split it off, which then landlocked that piece in back, is my understanding.
So we need a motion to send this to county for review.
I'll make a motion to send it to the county.
Lee, do you have anything you need additional from us for this one?
Just the same.
Okay. that in here?
Yeah.
And our part is here, right? We do that prior to going to county, right? Yeah. And we have to do part two, right? Okay. All right. Will the proposed action create a material conflict with an adopted land use planning or zoning reg?
No,
Will the proposed action result in a change in use or intensity of use of land?
no,
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community?
no,
Will the proposed action have an impact on the environmental characteristics that cause the establishment of a critical environmental area? Will the proposed action result in adverse change in the existing level of traffic or affect existing infrastructure for mass transit, biking, or walkway? Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and it fails to incorporate reasonably available energy conservation or renewable energy opportunities? Will the proposed action impact existing public-private water supplies, public-private wastewater treatment utilities?
no,
We don't have any sewer, unfortunately. Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources?
no,
Will the proposed action result in adverse change to natural resources, wetlands, water bodies, groundwater, air quality, flora, or fauna? Will the proposed action result in increase in potential for erosion, flooding, drain, and drainage problems? Will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health? Okay. So, need a motion for the seeker that these are all negative impacts that we determined.
I move that we accept the seeker as a negative impact on this.
Second.
Okay. All right, so that'll go to the county next month, and,
This month.
this month, sorry, and we'll get their review. And then we have to have a public hearing, and you said there are 2 property owners that are adjacent, right?
Anyone within 500 feet.
So, and then, based on the public hearing, we may have other things that, come up too, but at this time, we're good for now.
Nothing else you need from us?
Nothing else.
Easy enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
You get it. That one?
No, the color one, the one with the shaded in.
Yeah.
Okay, next is the attendance record, which we handed this out to everybody, and there is a requirement that we not only have training, everybody records their training, and that we have the training documented, that we get 4 hours of training every year, but also that our attendance is documented and recorded so that the, and available for public view. So we're gonna start keeping track of that, and we have to give a report, provide a report to the town board once a year. The next thing is the training. There's two training opportunities coming up. Everybody should have got the email on those. 4 hours for the year. If you go more than 4 hours, you get credit for the following year, so. Next is the wind amendments. So, just to make it clear one more time, we don't have many residents here, but the planning board is only a recommendation board on this issue. We're only making a recommendation to the town board, we're not gonna vote on the issue. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes, state your full name, legal address, show respect to others, let them speak without interruption, keep your subject matter to one topic, priority be given to town residents and landowners. Before we get started on that, there was a question last time about, at our September meeting, about conflict of interest, and some of the members on the planning board with a potential conflict of interest relative to the wind issue. And by reviewing the short course, which we refer to, and also by consulting with Lance, the members on the planning board that have a current wind lease can participate in all the discussions, but cannot participate in the voting. So we got a clarification on that. I know it was a question last time.
Who did you speak to someone on the Federation for course, or did you just go by interpretation of what you read?
Well, I went by, I can read this again if you'd like.
Okay, but you went by interpretation, you didn't talk to anybody?
Just, we got Lance's
right.
opinion on it, and then, based on interpretation in here, so.
What I said was that it's not just limited to voting, but also that they couldn't advocate for any particular position, so.
Wouldn't that be discussion?
It may have been part of the discussion, but if you can discuss without advocating a particular point of view. That remains to be seen, correct?
Correct. So is it gonna be a cycle that's gonna keep order?
Is there gonna be what, George?
He was just saying it's, when he made the comment, we'll have to wait and see if that happens, is there gonna be a sentinel assigned to step in?
I would think that's the duty of the chairman of the planning.
Okay, I was being funny.
Can I interject something?
Sure.
Have you all read the Berry Town Code of Ethics that was written some time ago?
I've read it in the past.
Because according to them, they shouldn't even be sitting on a board if they have a wind lease, should not have signed the wind lease in the beginning. In fact, it even leaves levity at the end of the Code of Ethics to fine people who have done so. I'm wondering if any consideration has been given to the Berry Town Code of Ethics.
Well, we depended on Lance to provide us with a recommendation, and that's what.
And I reviewed the code of ethics prior to giving my recommendation, so.
So, there was a question also, I just wanted to be clear that there was a question about myself. We have 2 members on the planning board that have current wind leases, and there was a question about myself, and I have no wind lease, no signed document, no affiliation with it whatsoever, so.
Okay, would that also include anybody that has a contract or is working for, or part-time has worked for, during the duration of these negotiations, that have worked for local farmers that have wind leases? Would that include them also as far as the discussions in the voting go?
I'm not sure I understand the question. He's asking if somebody.
The question is, if somebody's sitting on one of the boards and has voting power if they've worked for, or currently working or under contract for a farmer or someone who's signed a land lease, would they also not be voting?
Not in my opinion.
Pardon me?
No, I don't,
They should
in my
not be
opinion, they
voting.
would not be disqualified.
They would not be disqualified?
Not be, yes.
And what do we have to, what can we cite to review that? Where can we go to find out that they'd be exempt from that, from the town code of ethics?
Code of ethics.
Well, the code of ethics says something quite different. Mr.
John,
Mark.
who on here do you think has worked for a farmer that has signed?
Well, I'm not gonna mention it right now, but he knows who it is. And my question is the same, it has relevance, trust me.
Well, you thought a lot of, you thought Wes had signed
Are
and
you
hadn't.
attacking me or are we having a discussion?
No, I'm asking you.
Okay, let's be civil.
You had asked,
Let's be civil.
I am being civil, John.
Okay.
You thought Wes had signed on and he didn't, so you were
Yeah,
mistaken there, you were mistaken with Tom. Who on here worked for a
Well, I
farmer?
didn't mention anything about Tom.
Who on
In fact,
here, who
I
on
hope
here
that Tom
worked
gets
for a
the water
farmer?
tower. Oh,
Tom, suggestion, let's move on with the.
Yeah, I think we're getting off topic. The issue is,
my
just to be.
question remains the same.
Yeah, that's fine. We got a ruling from Lance that there's 2 members on the board that we agreed can't vote, and they're able to be involved in discussions, and the zoning changes proposed by Apex have been distributed to the board, and as Lee said, they're gonna be available to the public also. The zoning, the wind zoning that was established in the town, I think was in the late 90s? 08, late 2008, so it was established in 2008, and there's some guidelines that obviously are pretty stringent, and Apex is proposing some changes to those, so tonight we're here to listen to their proposed changes, and we're by no means going to make a recommendation tonight. There's more information to gather and hear, and before we hear from Apex, there has been a lot of letters submitted by residents with other proposed changes, and I'm not sure how others on the board feel, but I think it would be appropriate to take each of the issues that Apex is proposing, compare those on a spreadsheet to what is being proposed by the residents, which I believe is pretty much the same, and compare that to the current zoning we have. So, is that, go ahead, Ben.
Sure. Well, formally, I'm Ben Yaz, and I work for Apex Clean Energy, joined by Laura Bonnier, who's an attorney with law firm Young Summer, who may advise us on Article 10 permitting and also municipal law, so she's been helping me throughout. And so before I get started, I think that Lance had some questions that Laura should address about the validity of our proposal entirely.
Sure, I think Mr. Mark's point was about the standing of Apex to bring a petition. We reviewed the Townberry Code section 350-5B, which covers the filing of a petition seeking the relief of the town to amend or adjust its zoning laws. Apex has approximately 70 lease interests that have been recorded with the county, and it's our position that that's a sufficient interest in land to enable the company to ask for relief from the town, as it would be, for example, to ask for a variance or a site use or special use permit or site plan approval. There's case law that demonstrates that a contract vendee who has less rights than Apex is able to bring those types of petitions before the town. The other point I wanted to make is that we did have a landowner who has written a letter and signed a letter to join the petition, if I might give that to the board. That he's a resident and landowner, obviously, of the town, and is joining in the request in case there were any additional concerns. I think ultimately the message from us is that we're coming to you rather than relying on the state to go through and just tell you what to do. We are asking you for what we believe are some fairly minimal changes that would make the law consistent with what the state has approved in other cases. And we were just hoping that you will consider that. And I'm here for any questions on the standing and on the law.
And so I'll give a little bit more context to our proposal, review some of the recent history with this, and Laura, just feel free to jump in.
Sure.
So I'm going to read, if you don't mind, there's a lot of information here. So as Tom mentioned, Barry passed a wind ordinance in 2008. In 2011, Article 10 law was passed, which supersedes the procedural permitting authority of towns to review and approve a wind project under the typical seeker mechanism. It replaces the seeker with a different permitting procedure, which we've talked about at length. Happy to answer questions about Article 10. Article 10 still requires applicants like Apex to demonstrate compliance with the substantive requirements of local ordinances, so things like setbacks, the items that we discussed in our proposal, or it requires us to seek a waiver over local zoning from the signing ordinance, something that Laura was just mentioning. So this year, in 2018, the Casadega Wind Project became the first to receive approval from Article 10 Siting Board. In that proceeding, the Siting Board demonstrated that they're unwilling to grant the waiver over local zoning, whereas prior to the Casadega decision, we expected that local zoning waivers would be achievable for developers filing an Article 10 application. We learned through Casadega that that's not the case. We can't depend on the state for that writ large. To that point, at Casadega, the town of Cherry Creek was faced with a last-minute decision to increase the turbine tip height allowed in their zoning ordinance well into the Siting Board's review of the project. And even though Cherry Creek was supportive of the project, participated in review on the Siting Board or with the Siting Board, they still had to go back and do this at the 11th hour. That's right. Okay, so.
They had passed a resolution supporting the waiver, and the state still required them to change the law.
Okay, so that was in December of 2017, January of this year. Seeing that happen, Apex drafted a proposal similar to the one that's in front of you, same items, submitted it informally to the town. You'll remember we met January, February this year, respecting the town's wishes to delay review of our proposal until after the bicentennial celebration. We've held off on formally submitting it until last month, now knowing that we cannot rely on the Siting Board to grant waivers over local zoning ordinance, even ordinances like this one, which are generally friendly to wind development. So we are submitting this formally to you now. And I've spoken with Laura and a number of you about the review process. I understand your advisory board. Formal changes to local zoning have to be made and voted on by the town board, and that requires a public hearing. To summarize the elements of our proposal by section, section 350-98, I'm just going to say 9.8 for simplicity. They're all in section 350. 9.8 provides definitions for terms applied to other sections. We've added 3 here that are relevant to concepts that are already discussed in sections 103 and 104. Section 103 includes most of the substantive provisions that we're talking about. There's a variety of them, which either differ slightly from those applied at Casadega or require some additional clarity in our minds, so we proposed those changes to accomplish that. In section 104, deals with landowners' right to allow development on their land and adjacent land through contract, the existing land use. So we proposed that this section should also consider shadow flicker, as has been the case at Casadega. And then sections 105 and 106 deal with decommissioning the project at the end of its useful life. We again propose to include the terms applied to Casadega, which includes posting a security bond, and discusses how that's calculated. And at Casadega, the standard was that the town held the note for that security bond, which is important to know. So, happy to walk through point by point, but I want to stop there since we've discussed most of this in detail already. I want to be sensitive to the time we have tonight. We've worked with Lance to answer some questions already, so what you're looking at is the most recent version of our proposal. So when you put this out tomorrow, please make sure you have the right one. And with that, I'll stop. If you have any questions, happy to discuss the broader context first.
What did you say 103 was?
Excuse me?
103, what did that represent?
Let me answer that question.
Section 130 of the town code is the zoning law,
No.
and the wind ordinance is subsumed within.
350, I think. It's
350.
Oh,
Yeah.
350, I'm sorry.
And 103 deals with is titled standards.
With what?
Standards. So, the substantive provisions. For the purposes of this meeting, prefer to address the board. We're having 2 public open houses at the end of this week, here. Friday, 5 to 7 p.m., and Saturday, 11 to 2. And so, we'll make myself available with some of my other colleagues to speak at length about whatever questions you have about the project.
One tower that he controls the whole thing. He's got one land lease for each parcel. Okay, so the setback goes away and he's not affecting any other parcels, okay? And his, he becomes the victim of decommissioning, whether it be for whatever reason, whether it be from the host company stopping the operation, whether it be from the tower not working anymore, whatever it may be. That landowner who holds the lease with the wind company could all of a sudden be the victim of a lien.
Per section H of your law?
Correct?
I think there are 2 lawyers that are referred to here, but the lien, I think, is placed on the turbine.
On the property, yeah.
itself.
He can,
No, on the turbine,
Well,
right?
it's gonna be placed on the property.
Yeah, it would be placed on the, it says,
It
lien
falls
upon the
under-
property, okay, upon which the costs were incurred, so that would be on the real property, underlying real property.
There would be a number of steps we would have to go through before you got to that point. The financial security that the applicant is required to put up for decommissioning is very extensive, and it would need to be guaranteed to be there as long as the project is
But
there.
how do you provide those guarantees to the landowner?
Well, if it's the full cost of decommissioning the entire project, including the removal of all infrastructure that needs to be removed under the decommissioning, then it would be an insurance to everyone, including the town.
That's the purpose of the bond, right?
Yes.
There's a plan and money in place if Apex disappears off the face of the earth for whatever reason, or if, Apex is negligent, the project owner is negligent, then the money and a plan is in place to take it on.
I believe, and Lance, please correct me if I'm wrong, that this section actually refers to costs the town incurs that have nothing to do with decommissioning, or that are above and beyond what would be considered decommissioning. This would be if you had to hire Lance to write some letters saying that you need to decommission, or costs that exceed the amount, I guess,
This
exceed the amount.
was basically, at the time it was drafted, this was basically to address the problem of an insolvent wind energy company where, for whatever reason, the surety bond is going to be insufficient to do what needs to be done, or if the surety for some reason says, we don't think we are obligated, right? Because a surety is an insurance company, basically, and as we all know, insurance companies don't usually willingly hand out cash. So this was basically something to say that if the town expended any money, that would be a lien, I presume it'd be a lien on the tower and the underlying real estate. And it's very general right now when it says upon the property upon which the costs were incurred. But to say it's going to be an assessment, it could be an assessment against, it really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to say it's just going to be assessed against the wind company because they're gone. So it's got to be something that's going to be accessible against the underlying real property.
Yeah, again, it's
Heaven
a
forbid we have to hit this
multifaceted
point,
issue that we're gonna have to litigate fully in Article 10, so.
And
you know,
the state will require a very substantial financial guarantee for decommissioning. And they will require that that number be revisited
Right.
every 5 years or 3 years or however many years they decide is appropriate to make sure that you're keeping up with how costs are going. If costs are going up, then you need to put up more money for this guarantee. So it's certainly something that needs to be comprehensively looked at in the Article 10 process. I understand the question. I think, we can talk maybe in the discussion of host community agreements as well as in the decommissioning plan about what happens with those contingencies to make sure that we're covering our bases. But what will be required by the state is very extensive and very protective. There's a contingency that's required. It's pretty significant. So I don't know that you'd get in a situation where this would be triggered.
All these things are being based on the premise that they're never gonna stop.
No,
They're never gonna stop
These are worst,
generating
worst
dollars.
case scenarios.
Sure. No, I understand. But there's a whole section of the application that will address this question of what happened.
They will be decommissioned
yeah.
someday. Most likely to be replaced with something better, bigger. They're not gonna give up that spot on the ground. Will they?
Leases have term limits, right?
Right.
Yeah, but they get renegotiated.
We would have to renegotiate the new project.
Those leases with extensions are run, what, about 40 years?
Lease term, the operating period of the lease is 30 years with the option for Apex to extend 10 years beyond that and another 9 years beyond that, so up to 49 years, 30 to 49 years. So the hope, yeah, like you said, would be 30 years from now, we can make some simple changes inside the turbine without having to re-permit the whole thing. Maybe there's like a more efficient piece to the nacelle, and it extends the life of the project 10 years. Right?
But the good news is, and I heard today, that we as a civilization only have about 11 years left before global warming destroys us all.
They said that back in the 70s too.
Thanks, Lance. That is good news.
As far as what I found in the studies, is you gotta use the life of the wind turbines, 20 years, that's what they're pushing for. Then they have to either be remodeled, re-upped, or taken down. Cost right now, you were putting out 60,000 for decommissioning? Was that the figure? That, no? 60,000 per turbine, yeah, for decommissioning?
It depends on the turbine model. It depends on what your method of installation is. If all of your lines are underground versus above ground, it will have to include a very detailed decommission estimate in the application.
Okay.
And it would be on a per turbine and per, I think,
Foot,
foot
yeah.
of road and election line basis. That will have all of those numbers in there.
Okay, I didn't take into effect the underground and everything, but I just checked into just the tower itself. I checked into a 600-foot wind turbine, and I know you told me 60,000 to start with. I called 4 companies, I got an estimate from one. Right now, it's 65,000 they would do it for. They keep the metal, they keep the scrap, and they would take in the concrete base, they'd only cut it down 2 foot and put dirt back over it. That's at today's prices. So, I mean, you could just do the math down the road.
Well, you mentioned the revisiting of the bond.
Yeah.
Revisited every year.
Right, which is good, I'm glad to hear that.
Well, it's written right in here.
Yeah.
Reevaluated 1 year and every 5 years after.
Yeah. So there, again, a lot of ins and outs to this part. I don't think,
And there are also ag and markets rules on decommissioning in farm fields that we'll have to adhere to. So,
Speaking of the eggs and markets rules, did anybody get those? We had those once, I saw them.
Ag and markets guidelines for siting wind turbine?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you Google that, you'll.
yes, we can send it to us, that's helpful, but it's.
There's, and the lease agreement goes into egg and markets. Quite a bit.
Yeah, that's actually a very helpful resource because it's brief and to the point, you know. Collection line must be buried wherever possible, blah, 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 you know, like, use existing laneways wherever possible, right, so. Again, for public, general public asking you questions, that's a good resource. There are only two other points here, and they kind of pertain to decommissioning. So in section 106, other operating conditions, letter A deals with landscaping again, and to summarize, it sets a standard upon completion of installation, site shall be returned as close as possible to its natural state and in conformity with applicable state and federal regulations and guidelines, including but not limited to restoring the topsoil, the subsoil and topsoil to pre-construction conditions, and reforestation of at least 40% of woodlands that have been cleared. So we intend to add, or we propose to add, the following provision will not apply if the underlying landowner requests that a different vegetation type or landscaping measure be taken after installation of the project, such as planting of different agricultural crops or returning of barren land to agricultural production. So it gives the landowner a little bit of flexibility around the landscaping that we would do around it. So that actually is not decommissioning, right? It is it's installation.
Right, it's a restoration.
Restoration.
One other point, on your section of 350-106B, I'm sorry, A, which says add F. So it says the provisions that are set forth in this section will not apply if the applicant can demonstrate that the non-operation of turbines is due to conditions outside of the applicant's control, which I understand. I just think that doesn't refer to the entire section 350-106. I think it would only refer to subsection D.
We're pulling this up.
Subsection D says that it be maintained in operational condition at all times, subject to reasonable maintenance, repair outages, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have to read the whole thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that would apply to letter D.
Yeah, we should-
So I just say it's, all right.
I'll make that.
So it should say in subsection, right?
Yeah, it should refer back to.
Subsection D.
Not all of,
Right.
got it.
Would it be D and E?
Not E, no, because
Well, it's, yeah, E discusses special use permit, which would be, right, that's like.
yeah, I suppose we could say D. It would make sense.
Okay,
No, that's a good point.
we'll follow up to make those changes. That is the, that's the whole proposal. That's it. So those are the points that we're proposing. I understand you guys have a review that you need to do, have conversations. If we can make ourselves available for working meetings or to answer additional questions, we're happy to do that.
That's the other thing, I could ask if the planning board would want me to go back through these things, and it would only be a question of my opinion as to what I would think is a reasonable proposal, and what might be objectionable. If the planning board wants that kind of guidance from me, that's up to the planning board.
I think that'd be a good idea myself. Everybody else is in favor of that?
And I would just simply caution that because it's legal advice, all right, giving the planning board, it would remain, confidential. It's covered by attorney-client privilege. I mean, you can waive that privilege if you want, but that's up to the board. But initially, my intention would be to give my input as an attorney advising the planning board.
Would it be in the contents of a critique or pros and cons?
Yeah, things that I would think it either, would merit, there's some things in there that I don't find to be objectionable, I mean, they're clarification. So, I would say for those things, this is my opinion. For other things where I think there may be some question or what needs to be tweaked, I would simply make a recommendation to the planning board. It wouldn't happen until next week, but then we'll be gone Thursday and Friday. Actually, we're going to be gone Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And your supervisor may have to be working on a bunch of other things besides.
Well, we also wanted to go over what some of these others were requesting.
Yeah.
I think we better set up some workshops.
Yeah.
Once a month for a couple hours, isn't gonna cut it.
Yeah. The one thing that would be, I mean, we've got quite, take me 3 weeks to go through all that, but.
One of the things that I would say for the people who made those submissions, I mean, the one thing that at least Apex did is they redlined the things that they wanted to change, so it's easy to go in and pick out. I would think that they should do the same thing. If they're making proposed changes to our zoning law, they should, highlight specifically what changes they're proposing. Otherwise, it's kind of unwieldy. I mean, to read the whole thing and say, okay, now where is that in our law, and go back and forth and back and forth. That's a big consumption of time.
Actually, they kind of did. They have structure, height, clearance, access, and safety. And pretty much when I was looking before,
I didn't see that.
it kind of followed. That's where I'm looking at, is that part of it. All the rest of this was kind of, this was very clear what it was. The rest of this, I really didn't remember reading that online. Noise, insurance, shadow flicker.
But how they differ from what we have, that's what
Right,
I'm saying.
right, but it's easy enough to look at what we have to what they're proposing. Yeah.
As you understand, what obligation does the planning board have in terms of responding to every inquiry that, or proposed change? I mean, at what point do we stop?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think that at this point that you're under a legal obligation to undertake those reviews. And I can get into the reasons why, but I didn't do it here. So I guess it's a question of what does the planning board feel in terms of its own mission and responsibility to the residents of the town.
Can I just interject? It was at the beginning.
John's had his hand up for quite a while, Tom.
Yep, go ahead, John.
I guess a question here, Lance, and to the planning board. If you are making recommendations to the planning board and it's attorney-client privilege for them to discuss it, that would have to be done in an executive session then?
Well, I would think, yeah, any type of matter like that would be an executive session.
Because that's supposed to be kept confidential within, okay. Thank you.
The reason why those came up, those proposals, was because that's what the town board wanted us to do. I'm sure you're familiar with that. I mentioned it in the past. And we don't have the resources to hire counsel to guide us in that regard. So I ask that you consider our proposals, at face value and knowing all of that. And so I do ask, and they were drawn up from a number of other ordinances in other towns. It wasn't just something that somebody pulled out of their heads. It was something that they looked up and they did a comparison study of all those, and there was a great deal of time invested in all that. So in all fairness, I ask that the town board do consider those, as well as Apex's proposals as well. And I think, and along with that, I think any change of the town Whidden ordinances, I think a letter should go out and with not the details, but how many of the wind law sections that Apex wants to change. Because most homeowners aren't gonna be aware that that's coming out there.
That'll be up to the town board to do that.
Yeah, well, I'm just, but like, you know, you understand what I'm saying about reviewing the wind laws, that it suggests, because like, and Carrie McKenna's group hasn't even gotten hers in yet, but I understand it's on the drawing board. So,
There are 7 of them in there that are all the same as this.
that's
Just
right.
different
If
people
they're-
have signed them, so
Yes.
we don't have to go through every one.
that's correct.
That's one thing that would be helpful if we can get each group to provide it, so we don't have to sort through and figure out which ones are the same.
I
That,
understand that.
that would have been,
I had a question next.
Oh, go ahead,
Just
Jim.
procedurally, you know, if you're gonna, you would have to review them all to make your recommendation, right? You can't make a recommendation to accept one and then, you know, accept it to the extent, right? So,
My
Yeah, but what
question had to
the-
do with the fact that
Right.
there's gotta be a limitation to this.
Yes,
It can't be
thank you.
endless. What is, by law, the requirement for the board? What are we held to as far as reviewing these things that are sent in by the residents, you know, people?
A time, I want a time limit, I mean, 30 days, 60 days,
That's not gonna be enough time. Simply don't work.
But there's, you know, just
Well, we need
we
to
can't have a
time-
situation where it goes endless.
Well, if
Right, I understand.
you're gonna entertain those submissions, yeah, I think it would make sense to put a time limit.
I can understand time restriction to get those in, I can understand that part of it, but as far as the review, I think repetition aside, that they should, you know, in all fairness, be reviewed.
So we can, like say right now, we could say you have until end of October to get your things in that you want us to see, and that's it? After that, we don't see any more?
I would give them at least 30 days, I think that's fair.
So I'm just,
And I would like to see it more specific like this, you know, not a whole big paragraph of everything. I like it specific like this is. What you did was good.
You're talking about months of work there, can't possibly be done within the time restrictions. We don't have the staff and we don't have.
No,
the
I'm
legal-
just saying, now Clear Sky still doesn't have theirs in. I don't want a stack like this and a whole bunch of paragraphs. I like to see structure,
Short
high
and
clearance.
concise.
It makes it very easy to look, what you're asking.
I'm not on the committee for that, I don't know
And
what they're coming up with.
I did read these, you know, the submissions, I think they were all, if not identical, they were pretty darn close to being identical. And there are a lot of things in there that are certainly gonna be looked at by the siting board. I mean, things like environmental concerns, wildlife, wetlands, all those things are gonna be addressed in the siting board review and siting board litigation. So I don't know that it's necessarily required that we do already have a lot of that language in our law. So I don't necessarily think that, you know, we have to adopt every proposal that's in there. I mean, I think we should probably limit it to the things that we know are not gonna be part of the siting, you know, review and decision. And those are principally, from what my point of view, those are principally noise, shadow flicker, setbacks. I think those are the 3 primary concerns, at least that I picked out from those submissions.
Wildlife was also a big one, I think.
Wildlife is, again, something that will be, that has to be reviewed and determined that through the siting board. Bats, birds, wildlife, all that.
it just also to add to John's point about, you know, a deadline by the end of October, that the issues discussed in these alternative proposals would be discussed in the comment period for Apex's proposal, right? So this will all be before the board imminently because of our proposal, and, you know, the public will have the same opportunity then to comment on the exact same things that we're waiting on them for now.
And the participating groups will have an opportunity to make their submissions to the siting board as well. So there may be recommendations by Apex, there may be recommendations by these other groups. They're all gonna have to be taken into consideration by the signing board, and the signing board is gonna say, yes, we agree with this, no, we don't agree with this, here's what we're deciding.
So, I just wanna let you guys know that, we have been trying to organize a wind committee, but it was kinda shot down and said it wasn't needed. That would've,
Who's we?
the town, we've been presenting it to the town board, that we think the town board should set up a wind committee of residents, you know, to work on this project, because it's a major project, and to get input from everybody. But they felt that's not necessary, that you guys were the guys that make the decision.
Well,
So-
we represent the town. We're
Right,
supposed to.
so that's why you're getting inundated by, I don't know if that's a word. What I would ask now is, and I asked at the town board meeting, if Ben has had the opportunity to kind of explain and say what his proposals are and why, that you probably should allow the residents to do the same if they wish. To, you know,
Go line by line.
go along, tell them why, you know, why they feel that way, and, you know, and where they're coming up with their information, or why they're making those suggestions.
You think you're organized enough to have one spokesman do that?
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem, because you have all those. I think we probably could do that with Clear Skies, but you have a lot of individual residents that also wanna, you know, have their, you know, that's the way it was set up. You know, they're not one committee, they all wanna have their voice.
And I think in all fairness to the rest of the people who live in Berry, I think a letter should go to each household indicating where we are right now, what's going on with our wind laws. That Apex is proposing a number of changes to our wind laws, because most people just aren't in touch. And they should know what's going on, and then we should set, and then my suggestion is to set up a meeting, workshop meeting, whatever you want to discuss it.
You understand, John, but the way the town communicates to the community is through these meetings. To do more than that is going beyond.
Well, we send out mass mailers for other things regarding the town. I mean, I don't think it's a problem to send out a short letter stating what's going on, and just keep them informed.
You have more communication now than it's ever been in this town. You have it videotaped online.
If they're online, they can get it. But I think a letter to each household, at least you're covering your own behinds if you do that. And that's another regard, or, you know.
We'll take it into consideration, I think.
Well, thank you.
So we need to decide when we're going to review the other proposals. We gotta set a time to go through those, I guess.
Good idea to put a limitation when these can be submitted.
Yeah. Does anybody want to make a motion of a date that we should set as a deadline for submission of alternate zoning proposals?
You brought it up, John.
I propose the end of the month.
I don't know if you can ever do that. Can you ever say, we're never gonna change your zoning laws?
But we're
You're never
only,
gonna-
we're only making a recommendation though.
We're making a recommendation to the town board about what these changes should be. It's only a recommendation.
Or if there is changes.
And people can submit their recommendations for us to review.
I guess, yeah, you're gonna be making these recommendations. All proposals need to be in by, town board meeting is this Wednesday? This Wednesday?
2 nights.
2 nights. I don't know, is that legal to do it? And that, you have to let them know and then go another month after.
It's gonna come here, right? It's not gonna go to the town board.
Right, it's
Yeah,
coming
it's gonna come
here.
Right,
And the sooner we can have it, then we can have our
Exactly.
meetings and discuss this.
exactly.
And then make our proposal to the town board. So if we have it to the end of the month, we can have a proposal ready for the next town board meeting.
So you're gonna be making you're gonna have everything all set and be ready to make your recommendation the next month?
too.
I-
That doesn't give.
We don't know about that until we.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
don't
because
decide
that doesn't give the residents a chance to come in and, you know, present their voice. I mean, that would have to be probably next
Their
meeting.
voice is being represented by all these submissions by the end of the month.
Well, Ben could have did the same thing with his.
Well, with all due respect, the town has a process for this, it's in the town code, and, you know, we submitted a petition pursuant to that process, and we're happy to extend deadlines in that process, but that process is always available to anybody who wants to make a petition.
Yeah, I don't think you can get it done in any less than 2 months. Give them 30 days to drop it, 30 days to make your determinations. I think that's fair, in my humble opinion.
On one hand, I'm hearing that we don't have to listen to any of it. And on the other hand, trying to compromise, we're trying to come up with a deadline that's reasonable and prudent and expedited. All we were gonna do is give a recommendation to the town board.
Yeah. George, all fairness to you, carrying out, how long is it gonna take you to submit your letters?
What time is it? I will call. If she may already be in fact, but I'll call.
But, you know, that's my concern, is you guys have enough time to study it and react, and I think that's gonna take 30 days to get everybody together and actually go over it, tear it apart and look at it. And that's only gonna help you out and give you additional time. So I think a 30-day time limit, then an additional 30 to review it.
Well, I don't think it's fair to set a review limit. I think it's only fair right now to
Set a deadline.
to set a
Okay, that's
deadline
good.
for submission.
Put the deadline on it, and you take your time to.
Then we'll decide based on what we have to deal with, how long it's gonna take us to make our recommendation.
I'll go along with that.
Are speakers going to be able to
But
come in?
I guess I do want on the record from APEX
Will
that
speakers be able to?
you're not going to try to force the issue and try to bring some kind of an Article 78 proceeding or whatever. You know, you're gonna give the town the time that it reasonably needs to go through that review process.
I mean, it was never our intention to be sticklers about the 45 days. I think that,
Yeah,
I think that the point we're trying to make is that we do have a timeline that we're trying to respect.
That we understand, and we want to accommodate that as the best.
Sure, and we're happy to, you know, turn it into November, and I think, you know, the submission was initially made to the deputy town clerk on September 10th, but
So,
there's no reason why we
Yeah.
wouldn't agree to go into November and December.
and like Laura said, even if hypothetically the town adopted our zoning proposal here, 3 months from now, people can still submit new proposals, but you're looking for counter proposals to review in context of this one specifically, so, yeah.
So, yes, Lance, on the record, we're not gonna call you the Orleans County Supreme Court if there's no decision made by December. We just would respectfully
You won't
request.
make many friends if you commence litigation against the town, you know that, right?
I have plenty on my plate. I don't really think that that's a prudent use of anybody's time, but if we could get some decision by the end of the year, I think that would be.
I would think that, again, unofficially, I think if that's feasible.
I think by showing that we're proposing deadlines for submission is a step in that direction, that we're showing proof. Due diligence?
Due diligence,
That's right.
Is that gonna work, George, November 1st?
She's not gonna get a call, she's,
Well,
what was the decision?
we were discussing the possibility on November 1st.
Deadline by end of the day, November 1st.
3 weeks.
More than happy to provide precedent from other cases or documentation that supports it.
Yeah, it might also be beneficial, I mean, I had access to that Casadega,
The certificate.
the certificate. It might be beneficial if, you know, somewhere along the line, maybe on the town website, that there would be a link to that, so that, because I don't know how many of these individuals have had an opportunity to read through it. It's a 185-page document, and some of it's very, very technical, but at least it would give them a flavor of what those things are that the siting board takes into consideration, and the detail and depth to which they do it.
definitely worth reading. Yeah, we can, did you find it online yourself, or did we?
We sent it.
We sent you a link. We sent you a link.
And we can send it to you, to whomever that would be appropriate to provide to.
We need a motion for the 1st of November.
I make a motion that all proposals for changes to the wind ordinance or wind law be submitted by any residents, any town residents, by November the 1st this year.
Okay. Second?
I'll second it. Can I? Or no?
Well, maybe you should just.
Oh, we'll stay out. That's
Sure.
fine.
Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
We abstain.
Two abstain.
Okay.
When is the next
Right.
planning meeting?
The next meeting is,
We would know.
Second Monday in
It's
November.
November 12th,
Yeah.
but, November 12th.
is it the 12th?
It'd be the 12th.
November 12th.
Yeah. I mean, can we start doing a workshop on the ones we have
Yeah.
before then?
Is there any way that the groups can tell us who is, who's together so that we don't have to sort through all these and figure out which ones match?
Oh, I did.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did that over the weekend.
Nice job.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
I only read one
I'll
of them.
send that to you.
But you want to make to go over what we have now?
Hmm?
You want to make a workshop?
Yeah, we need to make a work day to go over that, sure.
Before November 1st, the ones we have now, and then afterwards?
Yeah.
I will try to get something to you, if I can, possibly by Wednesday. If I can, it'll have to be the following week, but I can email that to you, right?
Yeah.
Make a date to coincide after.
The following Wednesday, you said? So 15 is the next Monday, 17 is the Wednesday.
Yeah, I should be able to, no problem, have it by the 17th, if that's all right with you.
So we should set a time then for sometime after that.
Following Monday was the next Monday after that?
22nd would be the following
Yeah.
Monday. Now, will this be a public workshop or not?
Yeah, it'll be a public workshop.
Except for going over what Lance has to talk about.
Yeah, except when, yeah,
Well, is that gonna be a separate meeting?
we'll just go to executive session while we're discussing what the recommendations are of this.
Make it part of the meeting.
Yeah.
Half public, half.
What day was it?
22nd.
22nd.
October 22nd.
Yes.
October 22nd is a public meeting. Is that what you said?
Yeah, well, part public meeting, part executive section to discuss Lance's comments.
October,
Same time?
October 22nd, any other date?
6:30 for that meeting or
Same
not?
day.
The 17th?
You're invited.
No, it's the same day.
October 22nd is for the public meeting. Were there any other meetings that I missed anything?
Followed by, on the same day, after the public meeting, it would be followed by executive session.
So then the public workshop meeting, I'm a little bit-
October 22nd.
October 22nd at 6:30 p.m. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, we may not have all the proposals by then, but at least we'll have
We'll have plenty to go over.
plenty to go over.
Okay.
I have a request, respectfully, Apex to make a proposal as public as we can. Can we be copied on counter proposals that are submitted so we can prepare for the November 12th meeting, speak knowledgeably to them, how they would.
What are you asking for?
if we can be, if there's a way for us to get the counter proposals after November 1st so that we can review them in advance of the November 12th meeting. I assume that there's a mechanism for it, but since, you know, there's, could be a lot of people reviewing all of it, if the board can plan on that, it would save us all a lot of time.
Wes, you went through those, I'm aware of the ones that are on the public document that are all the same. Is there any other ones there?
One other
One
that
other
is
one.
quite different, and I haven't gone completely through that one.
Is that online somewhere?
Lee sent all
Yeah.
this to us.
They're
So-
on an email.
So
All
you-
right.
I think you're basically asking is whatever Lee sent us, send you?
I don't know what we sent you, but the counter proposals that speak to the issues that we're discussing in our proposals. We'd just like to be able to come on November 12th and be prepared to speak knowledgeably about them.
Well, they aren't really counter proposals, those are just proposals like you submitted.
Okay.
So you'd like us to make a copy of that
I
packet?
think that right now they
Most
should
of
be,
those are online.
Well, they're all electronic, if that's what you mean.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're not on the website, they were just,
they're not from this, okay.
they
They're
were
all
just,
sent to you.
they were just emailed to us for review.
I mean, email would be better for you, it just, and I know that you mentioned there are a lot of different things, so
Yeah, we're gonna
we could
switch
just
those.
get an email copy of it. Even if you just sent it like to Lance and Lance can forward it to us, or not to throw you into.
I can, well, I mean, I have them from your email, I can forward them.
Would be helpful.
No, actually, it's from your email, right? You sent me those, so I can forward them on to you.
Okay.
We're getting together.
Yeah, we're gonna publish that.
You just send it to carriers.
We need to, there were a couple changes we discussed tonight, but once we make that, we'll put copies out here.
You'll have them for the open house.
Submitted by.
won't you?
Yes, yeah. We can, yeah, if we get them, we can get that done by the end of the week, right, Lance?
Yeah,
Or-
yeah, it was a couple simple changes.
Yeah.
The open house, yeah.
Okay.
This Friday, they said.
That's our regular, that's our regular
Maybe
planning
that
board
we
meeting
can-
here.
It's right, it's cold. It's you and me.
Clear, clear, you got it? Okay.
Where are we at?
There you go. Solar, fundamental.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want what you've been given me tonight to go out on the website, or do you wanna wait until that comes, your proposals come?
We discussed a few changes to the proposal we discussed tonight, so those changes need to be made by Lance and Laura, and then Lance can send it, or Laura can send it to you, Lee.
Okay, so you don't want it on the website until then?
Yeah, it's day after tomorrow, probably.
Okay, so the copies won't be available then until after I receive it from you?
So there'll be no copies tomorrow?
There won't be no copies tomorrow?
They won't be ready for Wednesday. This changes. The effective Wednesday.
We're not gonna put out copies of what you gave today.
Yeah, there's just a
Till
few
you
small
see it.
changes.
Yeah, wait till you do, put those changes in. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're making changes to.
I want to make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss the appointing of the planning board member that we talked about last time.
So they're gonna make the changes and then
We
they're
can do it in the other room.
gonna.
So I need to-
Are we adjourning?
No, we're adjourning temporarily for
Wednesday,
executive
Thursday.
So you're
session.
going into executive session, not during the meeting.
Meetings.
Sounds good to me.
Need to open the meeting again.
Yep, open the meeting again.
We have a motion to open the meeting again.
Yeah, don't come out of executive.
Come out of executive session.
In a second. Can I do that?
Yes.
Okay, the one thing that I just wanted to bring up quick was issue of the letter that was provided. It's a letter to the planning board. It's in reference to a letter in support of the Heritage Wind LLC petition for an amendment to the town wind law. It says, "Dear Planning Board, I am the owner of the property located on East Berry Road in the town of Berry. I've signed an agreement with the Windmill Wind Company, and I support the company's proposed petition. Please accept this letter as authorizing and supporting Heritage Wind LLC petition seeking the amendment to the town's wind ordinances. Thank you for your consideration. Mike Van Lieshout." So, they handed me that. We had a couple other things on the agenda, which I'd like to make a motion that we table until the November meeting. One of them is the solar zoning, and the other is the subdivision of properties. So I'd make a motion that we table those until November.
So moved.
And, got that, Lee?
Lily and Joan, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And communications, there was no planning board meeting in September, so, and then motion for adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
Wes will second. And we're gonna gather again on October 22nd at 6 PM to discuss the other.
6:30?
Or 6:30, to talk about the other proposals.